Hey, Ron. Hey, man. I haven't heard from you in a while. Hope you're doing well. I'm just trying to provide a space if anyone wants to hop in and chat. I hope work's going well, Aaron. Um, yeah, I'm at work too. We, but I'm by myself now. So I worked with, I always worked with someone else for about 3 years, and maybe even before that, for many years. But since January this year, I've been working by myself, so I can do things like this now. I'm just getting ready for um, some time off next week. I think I'm not going to work next week. That's the plan. And this past week was kind of busy. My company has been preparing for a potential contract. There's a demo to a big customer today, and so we wanted to be ready in case the customer just says, "Let's go." So, um, so yeah, I've been busy last week trying to make sure we're ready to go if this customer decides to give us their money. We'll see. I haven't been able to keep up with what's going on in the corner, so if there's anything that was like a highlight, you know, it's kind of like the estuary protocol. It's like if there's anything that was a highlight, you know, maybe in your personal life, maybe in the corner, maybe in politics, just let me know. Congratulations. Oh yeah, Aaron, it was interesting. Last time we talked, you had referred to me as your Christian brother, and that's the that was the first time I've ever been referred to as that. But you did hear you heard my story, and so you know there's a um, yeah. I hesitate to call myself a Christian just because I'm not as orthodox as most people. So, and yeah, and I think maybe you can tell I'm not like an orthodox Christian. So, um, I definitely don't subscribe to most orthodoxy with regard to Christianity. But yeah, that it struck me when you said that the other day or weeks ago. And yeah, I have no problem with it. It just, there's the caveat that every Christian is different. And then there's a thought that goes along with that is, um, what, how different can you be before you get kicked out of a church? That's something that I think is an important question, which causes kind of anxiety for me about going to a church. So, but yeah, if you have anything that's been on your mind, let me know. So right now I'm looking at the our databases and looking at how they performed over the last week, and I take screenshots and save these screenshots of, if the work was too difficult, I would try to automate it, but it's not to the point where it needs to be automated yet. I don't think we kick people out of the church anymore. It's more like you just leave, I guess. So I heard that Sam Adams on the Transfigured YouTube channel, he has been excommunicated from a couple, maybe 2 or 3 churches in his life. So yeah, I don't know. Define excommunication. The action of officially excluding someone from participation in the sacraments and services of the Christian church. So, and I know that Sam, he doesn't, I don't think he's a Trinitarian, so he has been excommunicated, and I imagine it has something to do with his beliefs about the Trinity. I guess I should be popping these comments up here. Crispy Cow. I hope I pronounced your name right. I know that people are saying Paku, but someone told me once that it doesn't matter how anyone else defines Christianity. Jesus asked Peter, "Who do you say that I am? Who do you say he is?" That's all that matters. Well, my answer is going to be like, in my mind, there's a question of the importance of Jesus, because I think people can embody the pattern that Jesus embodied, and people did it before Jesus, and people were doing it in the time of Jesus and after Jesus. And so there's a pattern in which you live for the people who have not even been born yet. You're willing to sacrifice your life for the people who have not even been born yet. And there are humans who have done this throughout time. So, and then for Jesus specifically, you know, he's got a lot of recognition, and so, and then I've also met spirits. So I invited Jesus to help me, and to help me become a better person, help me do better work. And so I don't put Jesus on a pedestal. And that's something like, I asked Jesus to help me, but I'll also ask, you know, my mom who died when I was 2 years old. So I'll take help where I can get it. Right. So that's a different kind of Christianity that I have. It's even more heretical than Sam Adams' Christianity. So it's yeah, I baptized myself with the Holy Spirit, invited the Holy Spirit into my life, and asked Jesus to help me, you know. But do the propositions about Jesus even matter? So who do you say that I am? It's like, well, the answer for me, non-propositionally, is at this point, Jesus is a spiritual force that can help people become better and to transform into a better person in order to do good work for even those who have not been born yet. So yeah, there's my answer. The roundabout. I got there eventually, but the caveat is I would say there. I would be willing to invite other people, like you know, is it Siddhartha, Buddha? Yeah, I think there's others that like, and then there's the fact that it just happens, right? So there's we're connected to everything pretty much. So even all of the ones who have died already, whether you invite them or not, they are there helping. But by acknowledging them and inviting them, perhaps it can help you transform faster. It can help you enter into the right state of mind and the right spirit. Theological propositions don't matter in who you say Christ is. That's something entirely up to each one of us. The propositions. Yeah. And it's to me it's sad that the if you don't agree on theological propositions that you can be excommunicated. That's sad. It's disappointing. Um, that's not the way the church should be. So it's part of the reason I like being here in this corner. I like the idea of estuary because we don't get excommunicated because of our theological propositions. By the way, Chris, you're welcome to hop on. I know you may be busy, but the link should be up at the top of the chat. Chris, the musician, might get tired of this background music as it repeats over and over. Chris is working. Are you painting, Chris? Yeah. Um, so Aaron says, let me. Aaron says, we. So the we is the thing. So the truth is you and many people. When you say we, it doesn't necessarily mean me, but we say through Christ we are saved. And that's, I mean, I did invite Christ to help me. So if I am saved, I wouldn't know if it was because of Jesus Christ or not, right? And then the cool thing is, if you're behaving in the right way, you don't need to be acknowledged for the good work that you do. So I would say that Jesus doesn't care if I acknowledge him or not. But yeah, to be honest, Jesus, if I'm saved, it could be because of Jesus, because I did invite Jesus. I treat you like a brother because I feel like you are one. That's very nice. Jacob treats me like, he says I'm a spiritual brother as well. So there's kind of a fraternity that can happen. I also must said something similar to Jacob and Hezi, but I didn't want to be difficult. Wrapping a job up. Well, do a good job, Chris. I had a house done and I got specks of paint on the overspray on the windows and had some overspray on the new laminate floors. Yeah. My wife and I were talking about what it means to be lazy. And I said it basically means that the person calling the other person lazy has an idea of what is right and what is the goal, and there's perhaps a disagreement on what is right and what the goal is, and so then you get called lazy. I mean, I can appear to be lazy right now. I got this hat, got this hair that I haven't been cutting. I just shaved a little bit. I got trimmed. I look like a lazy person to some people. But yeah, do a good job, Chris. I wish we I wish we could have some interesting chat going on in the background, but it's cool. Amateurs. Yeah, but what's interesting, I think Chris and I talked about this last time we actually talked privately, is that what's interesting to me is the contracting. And so you could imagine, so Chris is a painter, and he could, as he does good work as a professional painter, non-amateur professional painter, he may have more demand than he can do by himself. And so he will have to delegate to others. And so then there's a question of subcontracting, and how do you manage these subcontracts, and what do you do about amateurs? And in my mind, it would be nice if it was all transparent. It's like, and it all comes down to individuals. This individual is someone who oversprays and doesn't care about overspray, or this individual oversprayed and came back and paid to replace the windows or cleaned them up. But that information, that level of transparency would be awesome. It would be like awe inspiring. Like, it would allow people to know when they made a mistake, and so that they would be less likely to make mistakes in the future. I mean, it'd be nice if the world of contracting and the world in general worked this way, so that mistakes were identified and shared with the people who made those mistakes. And Chris, I find most of the time it's carelessness. Yeah, this word care pops up in the corner. But the reason that people can avoid caring is because they can overspray and then there's no consequences. So if we participated in an economy in which, what is it? It's something like Angie's List, it's something like that. But if we participated in an economy where every individual was tracked, right? It sounds like the beast, the system of the beast. But if everybody was tracked and you were able to come back and take pictures and say, look at this overspray. Okay, it impacts your reputation. Now, all of a sudden, if you don't care, your ability to find work is impacted. So, I mean, transparency helps, I think, or I would hope. Chris says, get it in writing. Yeah. That is challenging, to get it all in writing. It would be nice if just every individual's reputation as providing services and being a human being willing to provide good services is available to the world. It's available to God, but yeah, it would be nice if it was available to the world. Let me get back to Aaron. I have to go AFP, away from my phone. That's the acronym, AFP, different than AFK. We continue on the conversation of amateurs. How can I be emotionally mature and spiritually mature? To continue the conversation, how can I be emotionally mature and spiritually mature? I was listening yesterday. I was riding, Saturday, I was driving, and I was listening to The Mindful Child. And it's talking about mindfulness and the importance of mindfulness. And so there are practices like breathing. You can pay attention to your breathing. And through paying attention to your breathing, you can develop muscles, basically neural pathways within your mind that that will then allow you to notice thoughts and emotions. A lot of people don't notice the relationship between thoughts and emotions. So, the practice of giving attention to your breath and being able to return it to your breath. And I would say, as someone who um, is a believer in God, you can also, every time you do that, you can thank God as well. Like you can thank, THANK. You can also THINK. Um, but with every breath, you can do that. So then you have this constant prayer. And so those neural pathways, there's a science behind it, uh, will get stronger. The ability to, you know, focus your attention. And there's another word called metacognition, to be able to think about thinking. What what happens is, well, I would say that's the path. I can't tell you what you should do about your emotions and your thoughts, but I can say that if you're blind to your emotions and your thoughts, then they will control you. So you watch television, set, and then set gives you thoughts and emotions, or the radio or whatever. All of these things we give our attention to influences us. And so defense against the dark arts, as Grimm puts it, I think has everything to do with what I guess many religions would talk about with regard to meditation. So we have to be able to be aware of the thoughts and the emotions and the relationship between those within us. And that's like the first step. Because I think we do things by accident. And we will absorb, this egregore idea. There's a spirit that can be in set. There's a spirit that can be out on Twitter, and it's everywhere. And if you don't have the ability to perceive your thoughts and emotions, then you won't even recognize that you've become possessed by a spirit, right? And if you're a Christian, ideally you would have the Holy Spirit. So if you can't identify the Holy Spirit and that which is not the Holy Spirit, which I would say through meditation, then, or prayer, that's another word that's very similar. It's a listening, like a prayerful listening. If you can't do that, then you will become possessed by the spirit of whatever you're giving your attention to. It might be the people you're living with. It might be that football game that you're paying attention to. It might be just anything. So that constant prayer, or as a Buddhist would say, mindfulness, that I think that's a key. The Buddhists talk about mindful walking, mindful breathing, mindful washing dishes. Chris Picow's mindful painting. Like every single thing you can do can be mindful and can be enjoyed. Well, some experiences are harder than others. Chris just had a baby brought into his home and his life and his experience, and so some of those experiences, the spirit of the baby can get to you, right? So, and that's not a bad thing. Sometimes the spirit of the baby gets you playing. Maybe you weren't having a playful spirit, but yeah, that constant prayer or mindfulness in everything you do, trying to be aware of the thoughts and the emotions that emerge, which are essentially spirit, and being able to identify which ones are holy or unholy. Like that seems key. It's like if you're playing an MMORPG, massive multiplayer online role-playing game, like World of Warcraft. You're going out and leveling up, and getting new skills, getting new gear. I think this, level one, the level one step This first levels, it has something to do with uh, what could be called prayer, or it could be called mindfulness. I've talked about it previously as far as when I talk about agnosticism. So you can become possessed by an ideology or an idea. It's a spirit. Being able to step back and perceive it, you know, trying to be with God, trying to be mindful of how that ideology and that spirit is shaping you. That's really important. So this is a bunch of language pointing at kind of the baby steps, which allow you to level up and go kill dragons. Um, but you can do it all the time, every moment, and some moments are harder than others. Hope that was helpful. I have to make sure you can't see me typing in secrets. Shout out to Jeff with Randalls United. Hope you're doing well. You're welcome to hop in. I wonder if Jeff ever gets mad. Like, you get the small glimpses at people on the internet, like Paul Vanderclay, for example. It's like, I know I interacted with Griswold Grimm enough that I got to see one time where he got mad. He was out on the porch and the cat was not behaving properly, and he got upset. But yeah, you only get a small glimpse at people's lives through these cameras. Jeff is working. Well, I hope this background music is good enough. I wish it was going through a list of just good, decent music to work to. But I only have I would have to find music, download it, upload it, develop a playlist, things like that. Good morning, Hezi. Hezi. I wish I could do the. Hope you're doing well. There's Tayo.
You're right, Gavin.
So, is it Tayo or Tayo?
Take your pick and go with it.
Okay. You don't care either way.
No.
All right.
How you been?
Been busy. Last week I was busy. How are you?
What?
How have you been?
Same, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Christmas period, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, I was busy at work, and then we decided we were gonna try to move. So we did some moving this weekend. We've had two houses, and we kind of made a decision we're gonna move stuff from one house to the other and maybe
Are they
consolidate.
close to each other?
About a 3.5 hour drive.
So no.
Well, it's all relative, but I like it at this house. I've got a nice view. I can see a river.
Is
Uh,
that in a different state or
Same state, Alabama.
America is so big? You drive 3 hours, you're still in the same state.
Oh yeah, and Alabama. Well, Alabama's long on the map. It's not very wide, but yeah, you can go. You can drive from the north to the south and of Alabama, and you can drive for, oh man, 4 or 5 hours, I think, pretty easily.
It's absolutely maddening. That's like you can drive across from North England to South of England in that time.
Yeah, yeah, it was pretty wild. That I guess the size of the United States and Alabama's not even a big one.
Have you moved now or are you still moving?
I've got. I just load. We're still moving. We left. I told the family. I said, grab everything. We can leave things where uh, you don't mind if it disappeared. And so I asked everybody to just grab the things that are important. And we ended up bringing some things that weren't important as well. But yeah, we'll probably have to do one more trip.
Are you staying at the new place now or are you still going back and forth?
I'm at the new place. We've been going back and forth for a little while. We built a house uh,
Nice.
close to where I was born, and so when I graduated, I went to college near where I was born, and then
Which,
after college went to Huntsville, Alabama, to work with like the Defense Department. But now I've started heading back toward the place of birth. So,
the return home.
well, near near the place of birth. I didn't want to go exactly back to. I was born in Opelika, Alabama, and I didn't want to go back there, but
Do you
near.
still have family back there?
I do, I do. So Opelika is probably about 40 minutes away now. So
Okay.
yeah, we've got all these interesting sounding names because of the Native Americans. So
Uh,
I'm in this place called Tallapoosa, Tallapoosa County.
is there still like a Native American presence there? Have they still got?
They pretty much got uh, manual forced relocation back in like the late 1800s. The
All
Native
right.
Americans were largely mistreated. If you submitted, you were and started dressing like a European and became a Christian, then you were
Spared.
you yeah you. I mean, I think there was some discrimination, but and then I think a bunch of Native Americans also adopted Europeans as well, and sometimes that meant stealing them, but sometimes it meant actually adopting ones that wanted to get away. It's an interesting history. I've learned a little bit about it.
Yeah, it sounds very complicated history.
Yeah, yeah. People want to go and take other people's stuff. We've been doing it since the beginning.
Ain't nothing changed, my brother.
Yeah,
It's still like it.
it's still in the news. I'm gonna take this background music off. So, how's life?
Uh, what's a question? It's interesting. I'll give it that. Life has been interesting the last few weeks or so. Um,
Yeah, interesting.
yeah,
It's that word for me means worth paying attention to.
I've been forced to pay attention to life, so to speak. Um, yeah, it's I very like almost daily, weekly, monthly, whatever, but very like often I get into this thing in my head where reality genuinely makes no sense and it frustrates me. Like, and For example, I'll be up at like, let's say 3 a.m., 4 a.m. I'll walk outside. I might go for a smoke and, just paying attention to my environment, just the calm, looking up at the stars and just being overwhelmed. But there are times where I'm looking at the stars and I'm just in awe, like overwhelmed by the beauty. But there are also times where I've overwhelmed by the vastness of it all and just the fact that there's no instruction manual. And the first time I remember having that feeling, I was like out of 5 or 6, where it's just like things just become too much. I'm like, why doesn't reality make sense? Why? And but also frustrated by the fact that no one else, well, prior to discovering this little corner, I felt like no one else was baffled by the yeah. So that's where I've been the last few weeks. And also, I didn't go to church yesterday, which is probably the first Sunday in very, very long time that I've not been to church. Um, and yeah, that was also strange. Like if it was strange to feel comfortable not going to church on a Sunday, and I was like, oh, interesting. So yeah, interesting. Life has been interesting.
So you have been going to church, and then yesterday you didn't go to church, and it didn't feel bad. Is that what you said?
It didn't feel, yeah, it didn't feel bad, but
Yeah,
that felt bad.
it felt. I got you. It almost felt guilty or something.
I
What?
was expecting to feel guilty for not going
Okay.
to church, but not feeling guilty is what actually led to the guilt. It's like, oh, interesting. But then,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Don't. So then you also said that sometimes you look at the sky and you get overwhelmed.
not just the sky. Like the sky is a good example of like something that you can, uh, something that's happening. I can, give an example of, but it's just life, reality, whatever. It's just existence. It's probably the best. Existence becomes overwhelming.
Yeah. There's something about like the unknown. Like we all are up against the unknown, uh, and maybe even the unknowable. And then, uh, yeah, what do you do about that? And I think, yeah. So that's that going up against the unknown and the unknowable can be overwhelming. Uh, there's a bunch of reasons to experience being overwhelmed, but that's one of them.
Yeah. I'm not sure who it was. I think it was someone either just chatting or maybe one of Paul's video. Um, I'm going to mess it up, but it's something like the I'm trying to remember. Basically, it's something like when you're wrestling with a topic or subject, there's a moment where you're the moment before you understand it, a moment like before you feel understand a subject or topic or whatever, where you're just struggling with the like how vast the idea is or whatever. And I think the quote was something like, "It's in that moment of struggle is the most real or the closest that's as close you are to reality. And once you get over that struggle, you're no longer as close to reality as you was during that struggle where you don't really fully understand what it is, but you're still interested in it." And I remember Aaron, I don't know where I heard it from, but Aaron, that I remember thinking, yeah, that's not a fun place to be, because that's a place where I spend most of my existence. And I think whoever said it was saying it in like, oh, this is like a good thing. It is like you're in touch with realities, so to speak. And I'm like, are you, or are you just, yeah? If you are, it's not a fun place to be. It's not as fun as whoever said it made it sound.
Do you drive a car or anything?
No.
No, yeah, that I know that when I drive a car, uh, if I'm driving down a path that I've been on before, it's not that stressful. But if I go into, a huge city like Atlanta, Georgia, and start driving through that city, and going down paths I've never been down before, it can be very overwhelming. Um, so there's this going into the unknown. That's a place that's not familiar, and it's like it has to be over. Like you're you, yeah, the amount of information coming in, and you're not knowing exactly what's relevant and not relevant, or trying to juggle many things that might be relevant. Uh, yeah, by definition, it's going to be overwhelming. It's
Yeah.
you can practice it, putting yourself in overwhelming experiences, maybe that aren't dangerous to you or anyone else, but allow you to experience it. I think the adrenaline would increase. You know how there's people who are adrenaline junkies, so
Yeah.
you can get into that. You can go
I
explore that area and get there. If that's the it's that if that's what seems like being closest to reality. You know.
yeah.
I
I don't
recommend
know,
not.
man.
I'm not a fan of doing the extreme stuff where
Yeah.
you can hurt yourself or others, but there are ways to do it. It's good
I
practice too.
I wish churches ugh, it's gonna sound so dumb because I'm sure you can find a church that does it. But I wish churches were clearer in the objective of bringing the individual closer to reality. Because like we use a lot of like we've got all of the words there, like in the Christianese, like we say all of these things, we use different words, but that is what we're trying to communicate in like worship and that closeness with God, all of these things that we speak about. But I wish we were clearer that it's not just a religious experience, it's actual realignment with, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. I'm reminded of Griswold Grimm wanting to do the paintball.
Paintball for Jesus.
But yeah, you and then Michael Sartori wants to provide a space for people to do like a trade school. So you get the idea that's coming through is um, applying, doing something real and practical uh, that brings you, grounds you in reality, um, you know, so that you can. I think Paul Vanderklay would say, connecting heaven and earth, right? Because if it's all just in your mind, if you go to church and you're just being serviced by the words, if you can't connect that into everyday life, um, then it's not actually doing anything. But but maybe there's a way to be at church in which it does, like what I'm getting. I don't go to church, but what I'm hearing is that church ends up being like a family. Um,
Yeah,
and
very much.
there are people who do not have family, and so it's a place where um, you can try to be a family and find a family, something like that. Um,
In my experience, that's been true. All the churches that I've been to, I've at least attempted to, be a family that exists together to varying levels of success. But I'm interested. What's your project?
my projects.
Yes, because I've browsed your channel seen a few videos. Um,
Well, my 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 general project is to find find people who are trying to do something, uh, and they're trying to do something good, and then try to help them. Because I have a lot of projects that I've thought about over the years, and realized I can't do it on my own. I ultimately, my success depends on working with other people as a team. And so I've tried to connect with other people and be that team member to a degree, right? And some people, it's all kinds of different people with different goals and different capacity, different competence. But
Yeah.
the most serious project, um, well, I mean, honestly, this husband, father, engineer, that's that's my that's me trying to connect heaven and earth, right? Um, my my children could end up having children who have children, and they will hopefully be taught what I was taught, was that if I'm a good father, then hopefully my son will be a better father than me, something like that. Hopefully my daughters will be better mothers than my wife, and this is a good thing. Like, this is a good pattern even at work. If I'm a good site reliability engineer, I will try to find someone who's a better site reliability engineer than me and point at them and say, this one can be trusted more than me, right? Um, and then another thing I was taught by my father was he didn't care what I ended up doing as far as like my career. He said I could be a trash man, but try to be the best trash man I can be, right? Um, so
Oh,
that's
good advice.
yeah. And there's a lot
Good.
of, I mean, cleaning up trash is actually, I
It's
think it might
such
be
hard
one,
work.
but it,
It's
it,
like
it actually
I
might
did
be
it for
one
a
of the
week.
most important. It might be one of the most important things. It's right. So a lot of the most important work are the least paid. Uh, Cleaning trash, teaching children. It's like, if it doesn't pay well, it might actually be a really important job. And so, but yeah. So you clean. You said you actually were cleaning up trash for a week, and it
I
was very
yeah. Part of I think I was in college, which I think you guys call high school. 18, 19, or 17, 18. Yeah, I was doing a bunch of temp jobs with this agency where they were just was mostly warehouse work or like driver's mates, things like that. But then one of the weeks I was given a job to do. They said it was driver's mate, which usually means it's the easiest of the jobs that they've got. It's usually you're going with a truck driver, someone that drives delivering sofas, and you spend most of your working time driving. So, and you're not even doing the drive; you're just sat in the passenger seat. So I was so excited to get, and then I got there. It was like a 3 a.m. 4 a.m. start. So it was early, and yeah, I got there, and it was just relentless, and the smell, oh my days. I was meant to do it for like a few weeks. After like the first week, I was like, no, I'm not going back. Yeah, I've got a lot of respect for people that pick up trash.
yeah. Well, when I tried to imagine, like, if I had become, well, I mean, I think it's hard to define. Like, my project is something like, building the kingdom of God and peace on earth. But that might mean that it happens in 300 years, right? So, um, and so to bring that down to earth, that's an awful high goal. Something you can do is try to provide clean water. So I'm interested in clean water. It's like, when people talk about those who die from a virus and you should wear a mask, my brain wants to compare it to how many people have to walk miles to go get water that's not clean, which causes disease. So it's a way for me to ground myself in the reality that there's a lot of people who don't have a reliable access to clean water. It'd be something good for the world. And lifting up, it's a rising tide lifting all boats. This kind of thing increases the potential of all human beings. Right now, there's probably a Nikola Tesla potential that is too busy, uh, just, and sick, because of a lack of a clean water. And if they had clean water, it would change the world. But I'll have to promote the convective heat engine. So I've had these ideas for a decade and dreams, and I got connected with a guy who basically claims that he's been given an idea that this giant tower, the bigger the better, that can provide a reliable supply of clean water, and it's never been built before. And we tried to enter it into the X Prize, and it got reviewed, and basically they said that you're not. I think the main criticism is that it's not marketed very well. The marketing stinks, but it's an idea that can potentially uh, terraform deserts, uh, providing a reliable, predictable supply of clean water to 100,000 people or more. And so you could build these things throughout the world. But so I built a website for this guy. So that's me um, connect. Basically, I had
Being
my
a team
idea.
member.
Yeah, I mean, well, it's interesting how it worked out. I had my idea of what I worked on when I was in college, being an arrogant person and going to the dean of engineering and stuff. And then I wanted to present it. Like I try to extract what Hezi calls the divine spark. So even in my failure to create this perpetual motion machine that I had, the divine spark was that it was a it was basically a pattern of cooperation built into the design that I had. And when I submitted my proposal to the National Science Foundation, they said this is actually a unique idea. It's not a perpetual motion machine, but what you're doing has never been done before. And so I have a little graphic and I have a blog post, and I wanted to share it with Karen Wong with the meaning code. And she's connected me with this guy, Jason Delport. And it's like, oh, he has a tower that's supposed to provide water. And so my design was built around moving water. And so we got connected, and I told him, I said, you can let me try to prove that your idea does not work, because I know how it feels to have an idea and believe in it. And then I had to be the person who actually proved that my idea would not work because no one else would. And so I told him, I said, let me try to prove that your idea won't work. And I took 2 years of physics and did advanced math. I'm not an expert in the area where this technology would be uh, easy to grasp. So the actually it's the HVAC people who work on HVAC. Those are the people who can grasp this technology, because the technology to provide clean water is based around um, what happens in these climate controlled buildings. Uh,
Oh,
yeah, so it's actually funny that if you're an HVAC technicians will get this technology. Um, but yeah, I connect. Karen Wong was the bridge. I got connected with Jason Delport. I tried to figure out why his design would not work. I had to learn about um, the physics of how how fluids and move through the atmosphere and how the temperatures change. Um, and it all made sense to me. I couldn't find a hole, couldn't find any energy loss that would be too substantial, and so I built him a website. And so the plan is try to find someone to prove that it won't work. So it's a yeah. That's the big project. Is Peace on Earth. It's connected to water, but
it's
the
funny
small
when
project
you.
is I try to help Grimgriz when he wants to do something. I try to at least provide some help. Or when Chad, he wanted to create Jeopardy, I went in and added a question and answer on his Jeopardy thing. So I try to be a team player. That's my general strategy.
When you said a tower that provides water, my image was the mountain that the Garden of Eden sits upon, because the biblical description, you've got water coming from all four sides, I think coming down on two sides and going up on two sides. That was just the image I had. But yeah, that sounds very ambitious.
Yeah.
Um, it sounds like a good thing, and like a good thing. It'll be a good thing in the world. And I think
Yeah.
your strategy of being just helping where when and where you can sounds like what Paul keeps describing he wants this little corner to be, which is sounds really cool.
Yeah. The the thing is so like this little corner. There's a movement within the corner for leadership, right? You heard of this?
Uh, I've I've heard, I don't fully understand, but I've tried to. Um, I recently just joined Jacob's Ladder Discord,
Yeah.
and I read the all of the levels, and they make sense to me. I was like, okay, this would be, I can see how this would be a good thing of people knowing where they're at, because instantly I knew where I was under. I was like, okay, so I'll be here, and then like I know his idea is like the higher you get, the more, I think it's Jewish scholars are like the, and people that he knows are the have the highest
And
expert.
and that's Jacob's ladder, and Jacob's ladder is based on Torah, like the Torah is sacred, and so. But then if you could go say, well, who's going to fix my car? And it might be that the people at the top of Jacob's ladder are at the bottom of the ladder for who's going to fix my car, right? So
Yeah,
these ladders, I mean, you have to, like, I like this image of the Star of David with this inverted pyramid, because at the top of one pyramid, which
it's
I'm
the
saying
best
is
of
like
the
a
other.
ladder, is, yeah, they're going to be at the base of the other pyramid on something else. So you have to realize that every human has strengths and weaknesses.
I
And there's,
like that image.
yeah, that's why I I want to steal the Star of David.
What a thing to say on Jacob's channel. That's hilarious.
Yeah, but I think so. Jacob had a project idea called crowdsource mail, and the idea was basically, and I went and I put in, you know, tens of hours. I don't know, maybe 40, 50 hours into building a little. I'm a software engineer, so I built a thing where basically the idea would be that there would be an email inbox, and people could send email, and then a team could filter and categorize and tag the email so that the signal could be raised up out of the noise, right? And we were, and Paul Vanderklay had mentioned at one point that he'd be the guinea pig for it, but it kind of fell through the cracks. Now, I'm connecting that with the recent conversations about leadership, because Paul, I'll criticize Paul. Paul's saying, go start it. Whatever you want to do, go start it. The thing is that there are problems you experience at scale that you don't face, right? Like, I don't face the same kinds of problems that Paul Vanderklay faces, or you can go up to more popularity and say, Jordan Peterson, or you go up in popularity and you could say, the president of the United States. And so, um, if you're interested in helping things work better at scale through technology and crowdsourcing and organizing people, like, which is a good thing, I think, because I think that's actually on my blog post. I call it the human resource problem. Like, if we could actually organize humans effectively, we could um, do things like provide clean water to every human on Earth. That's something the church could do if the church could organize effectively,
Hmm.
um, generally. But it's hard to do that. It's hard to organize effectively in order to accomplish a goal. So, you know, if, yeah, and basically, in order for, if you're building a product like this crowdsource email, um, you need to have a customer, right? And one of, like, for all the businesses I've worked with in software, we have there's a customer that has a problem or a job that needs to be done, and the business that provides that software to solve that problem, there there's a there's a benefit for finding a customer who will partner with you, so that there's a mutually beneficial relationship. And so when there's a call for Paul to be a leader, um, it's directly related to the amount of popularity he has. If
Hmm.
and it's and if he turns around and says, "Well, go do it," well, now whoever wants to help solve the scaling problem and try to direct resources towards something good, maybe like clean water for people on Earth, um, for him to they then have to become popular first. So, it could be that Paul says, oh, here's a tower that can provide clean water for the entire world. It just so happens that it maybe even maps onto prophecy in the Bible, uh, you know, and he could, then there could be networking towards people who have more popularity, such that this thing could end up actually providing clean water for the world. Or maybe it's something different, and there would be an economic argument to say, hey, the best way to provide clean water for the world is to, as Lost Cause said, um, purify salt water. The and actually, I think this tower would actually be less cost than desalinating salt water. So it comes down to economics, like, and what are all the benefits of this tower, for example, um, and what is the energy cost? So there's actual professionals who can look at it and say that, oh, this is or is not feasible, and this is why. But you know, I, yeah, that's Paul's move. My criticism of Paul is his move to ask others to do it and to build it is basically causing others to have to then seek out popularity, which is like a dangerous move in general. If we're going to try to go become popular, it's better if we can say, "Hey, you're popular. How can I help you?" That's that's a better move.
I'm not still not clear out the why popularity is the big factor in determining
Why
leadership.
popularity? Um,
Is it like strictly for YouTube space? But these projects don't sound like they're all YouTube.
so it all depends on goals, right? And Paul Vanderklay's goals, for example, um, is to. I hope I can state them correctly, but he wants to. I'd go to his Twitter profile. Basically, he wants to help equip people with the skills for which there is no law against them, which has something to do with the fruit of the Holy Spirit, which when it's embodied, it looks something like estuary, and and he he does not want to ruin it by becoming a leader, um, and I think he has a good valid concern there. But then I heard Jacob Faturechi say, well, maybe we need to pay for a secretary. Maybe Paul Vanderklay needs a secretary. And that's the thing is, so if you, yeah, Paul Vanderklay's ability to train people uh, to be possessed by the Holy Spirit, manifest good fruit, and spread it, and help good fruit emerge, through the Holy Spirit. And this is true for anyone. Um, is dependent on how well we can cooperate together. Like, this is the thing I built in college that was a perpetual motion machine that did not work, but proved the mathematically proved the power of cooperation. Um, so if he works by himself, his ability to have an impact is limited. Now his approach is to allow for the organic growth because he doesn't want to be a burden and impose something that isn't going to work. The counter argument is that if he can cooperate more effectively and have more impact. That's the counter argument. That's what the Mark Lefebvre, Jacob Faturechi, and like Manuel are arguing. So I think they both have valid points of view. Your ultimate question is why does Ooh. I muted you for a second there. There was some weird feedback. I can unmute you again. How's that? Is it working now?
I think I'm back.
Okay.
Yeah. So what did you say? Sorry.
Oh no, your ultimate point was why does popularity matter? So if I wanted to go start, I guess the question is, if I wanted to go, I hear a little bit of that feed. There you go. If I wanted to go create a bunch of spaces like estuary for people to have conversation, um, my reach, there's this term called reach. I actually have I'm a bit of an expert in the marketing technology, and reach is a technical term. But my reach is limited unless I'm willing to pay for advertisements. Paul Vanderklay can he has more reach than I do as an individual, and so these are things that Jacob understands with his training with public relations. So um, and Jacob has a valid point. We don't need Paul Vanderklay, and we don't need Paul Vanderklay to be the leader of the thing that's going to accomplish the goal. The question is what is the goal, right? So uh, we'll
That's
see.
what I kind of.
Well, the thing is Jacob doesn't want to impose a goal. I don't think. I think his goal is something like "Thy will be done." Right? He wants to serve God, um, and he wants to provide some kind of a structure and use the knowledge that he's obtained in human relations in order to serve God as effectively and be as productive as possible. Um, Something like that. So based on what he studied, he knows that doing a structure with some type of organization with leadership is going to be more impactful than what Paul's doing. So he doesn't want to impose a goal though, and so there's ideas throughout history and government and organizations about, well, how do you structure yourself in order to identify a goal or identify your mission statement. So it's not that. So Jacob doesn't want to do that. He wants to facilitate a space so that people in this network can um, specify, you know, for example, the mission statement, the goal, the operating procedures, all of these things. This isn't something where any one person would be the one who um, that makes all of the decisions, and that would be baked into the the rules. I think I forget there's actual technical names for when you like structure an organization or a business. Um, it can be baked into the rules, right? So, I mean, it actually, I think what Jacob wants to do can work and can be good, and and it's just there has been an invitation for Paul to participate, to be like on the board or be the head of the board, but Paul didn't want to do that. And then I think it's true that we don't need Paul to do that. If he wants to do what he's doing now, then that's perfectly understandable. And I don't think that, and to Paul's point, I don't think that Jacob trying to do something different than the way Paul's doing it, I don't think they have to cause harm to each other or mess up, or interfere or have a negative impact on the other. So when you're working with the power of the Holy Spirit, people can go off and do their own things, and they can be mutually beneficial, right? Even though they're different.
Few thoughts ran through my head. Let me just get them out as I remember them. Firstly, I think Paul's from what I've seen of him of his video, is always been very reluctant with his, just even how popular he is now. Like he's always a little bit wary of what the popularity means and like how to navigate it. So I can understand why it's like, okay, yeah, I don't want to use my popularity to, because that makes it. I think with oh yeah, this was the other thought. The goal. I think almost most people in this little corner have very different goals from what, because just let's look at the pillars. Peugeot, Van der Clay, Viveki, Peterson. Like those are four very important characters in this little corner, and they have very different goals for what they're doing. And they in all four pursuing their goal to the best of their knowledge and to the best of their ability, it created this space, or this space where you're now able to speak now, and it affords Jacob to be able to launch the Just Giant, and all of these good things have been birthed from four individuals with very different goals, seeking the God's will the best they can, and even consciously or unconsciously, they're being truthful and they're being genuine in their pursuit of whatever that all four of them are doing. And it's created this space, which I think is a good thing. I think the same people from this space can accomplish similar things by all pursuing their goals and trying to accomplish it. Because I think Jacob is right to not try to assert a goal onto the, because I don't think that would work, because there are so many different characters here for different reasons, and we've all been sort of like amazed. Like there's a thing in this little corner where this little corner is obsessed by this little corner and love talking about this little corner. And I think that's because we're all amazed how all these different characters that don't fully share my goal, but there's this spirit of unity where it's like we're all engaged in conversation and like intrigued by each other, curious by each other, but also like finding moments like the last man was on with the lady who just like captured the spirits of the air and just like said what people were feeling. Like that keeps happening in this little corner. And I think that's what Paul is sort of like wary of messing up by setting a hierarchy where it's now um Paul's at the top and then you've got all these different levels. I think the what's been happening so far has been cool. And I think if we're all being genuine and like we're all pursuing our goals and trying to bring God's kingdom on earth the best we can, I think cool things will continue to happen. So that's how I see the goals thing. There was another thought, but I don't remember. So I'll stop talking for now.
Yeah, there's a risk. So if Paul ends up trying to, it's like, for example,
Oh, sorry, I
go
just
ahead.
remembered what the last thing was. I think Paul's priority also is local church, and like is shared his concern about the future of his church, and I think that's weighing on him. I think is intrigued by what this little corner has to offer, but also wary about the lure of, because I try to like imagine this guy who's been pastoring this little church like that no one really knows about for decades, and then you've got like the last, I don't know, 5 years or so, this weird things just birthed out. It will be very weird for him to just, okay, this is definitely where I'm gonna go, and I'm putting all of my effort and energy into this. Whereas he's got people that he's known for decades in his church that is, they've been through life. There's relationship that's developed over time. So I can understand why that's also his priority. Yeah, sorry, that was the last thing.
Yeah, there's a um, yeah, when I was in Bridges of Meaning, I I I thought that Bridges of Meaning was Paul Vanderklay's Discord server, and um, I thought that people were in service to Paul and Paul's goals, and Paul's goals had something to do with um, having an internet church. So this was kind of like my first assumptions,
Uh,
and so I thought it was professional, like and I'll say that referencing my past is that I went from working with the Defense Department to trying to start a small business to working for a family oriented company. And when I worked for that family oriented company, um, they they cared about the relationships with the people, I would say just as much, maybe even more so than the goal of the company, right?
Mm.
The goal of the company has something to do with making the company profitable and serving the customers, right? But they actually cared about their employees, and it was like a family. And so I say that because what I noticed, is that Paul has relationships with, for example, Joey, who was the admin of Bridges of Meaning, and the creator of it, and which was actually separate. It was never Paul's. It was not in service to Paul. Like that wasn't the primary goal. And that's my perspective now after the fact. And so when I came in and started saying, "Oh, we're going to be a professional organization that's trying to help Paul be as productive as possible," I was ignoring the relationships, like the relationship between Paul and Joey.
Uh,
And so, uh, you know, Paul, he's in a situation where he knows some of the people who are homeless living around his church, and he has these long relationships with people in his church. And so, um, there's something there's something about trying, for example, if you wanted to be serious about providing clean water to all people on earth, um, because yeah, if your attention is valuable, which I think that's kind of like key acknowledgement. Our attention is the most valuable resource in the world. When you are helping let's just say some crazy drunk person who's been on the streets forever, you're basically making a sacrifice, right, with your attention. And so, maybe the goal of providing clean water to all people on earth is being sacrificed to a degree because of this relationship you want to have with the crazy drunk person who does sex and drugs at the foundation of I forget the phrase, the foundation of the Lord, of the house of the Lord. So, yeah, it's a criticism of Paul in terms of uh, being able to accomplish some big goal and be productive and effective, but it's also not a criticism because he's caring for the person that's basically struggling right outside his church. And it's like, I can't say that he's wrong to do that. I can't say he's wrong to give his attention to the crazy drunk person. Um, there's just trade-offs. And so, if you want to provide clean water to everyone on earth, uh, the people in leadership positions trying to do that are not going to be able to go meet with every um, crazy drunk homeless person in the world, right? And it's just a matter of priorities, right? And it's not a and there's and just the fact that there's trade-offs. So yeah, it's not an attempt to say Paul is wrong, and that the other people are right or wrong. It's just the way it is. There's a trade-off. All these decisions we make, giving our attention to one thing versus another, there's always a sacrifice that's happening, and so there's
yeah,
we're all making sacrifices, and sacrificing the good. Like if we try to attend and do good, there's all these other good things that we're sacrificing, right? We can't just serve all the good, and we depend on each other to help do that. So if Paul wants to be the pastor who tries to just be lend an ear to a crazy drunk person, there's nothing wrong with that. That's who Paul is, right? And maybe that's why he has the subscribers he has, right? So
I'm trying to remember what parable it is, but I think it's parable of the talents. I'm not sure, but it's the one where everyone's got different amounts. Um, and then the king or whoever gives his servants different amounts. One's got one talent, one's got two, one's got three, whatever. And then you've got some that go off with their talent, invest it, and get a lot more returns. You've got some that aren't. They're all the different. Then you've got one that just buries it and just like tries to keep it as it is. And I think what um you're not criticizing him, but you are warning Paul of not fulfilling his potential, of burying his talent. And yes, there is like it is doing good things, but if you see like, oh Paul, you could be doing even greater things yet, I think it's out of love. And that's why this little corner is so cool, because you're even in criticizing your it's not from, oh you should be doing what I want to do. It's from, you should be doing like, there's even more greater things that you could be doing. So I think that's pretty cool. I like it.
Thank you. Yeah, and that's not where I was a few years ago. And maybe Paul has helped me become a person. Paul and many others in the corner, for example, have helped me become a better person. They can, recognize, yeah, to not be condemning, right?
Hmm.
I think I asked one of the last questions I'd asked Paul in a Q&A had something to do with um, when Jesus is teaching about judgment, and for which measure you use to judge, it will be measured unto you. But he switched up the words and used the word. He wanted to distinguish between discernment and condemnation, because both of those things are connected to this English word judgment. And
Hmm.
so I think my takeaway was that Jesus' teaching was more about condemnation. So yes, we should be discerning, but we need to be very careful in our condemnation. And so I don't know, like I don't. Here's a weird one. A question: is Jacob being condemning towards Paul? And I'm not seeing that he is. I don't think he's condemning Paul, and I think that's key. People have to realize he's. I don't think people are condemning Paul at all. I don't see it. I think people are trying to just express, hey, there's some potential here that's unrealized, and and you know, and Paul's. It's a good question. Well, what's the goal? And he says, I don't even think you know what the goal is. Well, the goal is to build the kingdom. There's something like, I think our Jewish brothers, they believe there will be a king, Mashiach, and there will be a kingdom, and there will be peace on earth. And I imagine peace on earth would have clean water. So uh, the yeah, maybe that's the goal, and we're trying to figure out how to do that. And we can even have different, like there's another thing Jacob and I talked about on some of our first talks was subsidiarity. You don't want a centralized organization, and he would point at the Catholic Church and their subsidiarity and how they organize as kind of being a good model. And I'd referred to it as decentralization, and I think Europeans refer to it as like a localism, maybe. I don't know. I think Ginger Bill had mentioned some word. But yeah, I think we all agree we don't want some leader making all of the decisions for everybody. But there can be a structure in an organization, and where people who have disagreements can, one estuary can work one way, another estuary can work another way. One might produce better fruit than the other, right? There's experimentation happening. So you can have a kind of organization which creates a space where you can have disagreement, right? That allows people to play with different ideas, but it can still be organized better. Yeah. But yeah, the goal, I think, to Paul's question, what's the goal? What are you trying to build? I think the thing we're trying to build is the kingdom. So, and it might take hundreds of years. It might happen after we die. We don't have to be in a rush. He's leading people into the life of the age to come. There isn't anything more important he has to do right now. Yeah. The question is, yeah, how much attention do you give to the crazy drunk person? And I think you could talk to Chad about this. And Chad talks about sometimes you there's a time when you should not be talking to the crazy drunk person, right? And maybe the time to talk to them is once they're sober, right? Right. And so when they're plastered, it's not the right time. It may not, that may have been Chad. So we can get better at deciding how we give our attention to people. And there's just questions about what's the answer. Christian. I really like Christian's video. He was going off to the store, reminiscing a little bit on the Walmart people and about how he can, to I think Lost Cause's point, um, leading people into the life of the age. I guess leading people into the proper way to participate, and maybe talk. Giving some of your time to the crazy drunk person is the right way to participate. But we're trying to figure that out. And then Christian asked questions like, when the person leaves their grocery cart in the aisle, how do you participate with that? Right? There's at every single moment, or maybe someone cuts you off on the way to the store. At every single moment, we have this opportunity to try to possess the Holy Spirit and participate in the right way. This is one of the reasons it's so beautiful that we're each inclined, at least slightly differently, from one another. Some of us are inclined more toward bottom up, others toward top down. Yep, we're different, and this is good. Both top down and bottom up being pursued simultaneously perhaps enhances the chances of meeting the same end from different beginnings in different directions. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, you wouldn't want to just do one way. Steal some of these lines. Steal them. Yes, you can steal lines. I think I've heard Paul in Grim Grizz's video. He said, "I'm going to steal this."
He's a pastor.
Yep. And the top-down perspective must be heading in its proper direction, as must the bottom-up be heading in its proper direction. Each would be wrong in dictating the other to follow its direction. I also think there could be a balance. Like,
I would presume that, and Christian, you can jump in. I would presume the top down, the bottom up perspective, heading towards the proper direction would be heading towards God, love, that sort of thing. But what's the proper direction for the top down?
I think that you hit it. It's like, the key is love God and love people. So I guess
love God, love people.
Well, what is it? Jesus said that, I wish I could quote Jesus, but yeah, among all of the commandments, the greatest one. And so you could look up the greatest one, but it may be something about love God and love your neighbor. But I like to substitute neighbor for people, and maybe even sometimes connect that with everything if you can do that move, which is really hard. But
I like Paul's how does he phrase it? Love your neighbors up to and including your enemy. Because that, loving your neighbor, it can be, you can just choose to love your lovable neighbors, but the emphasis is the enemy. That's where it gets tricky.
Well, I think the reason I'm okay with neighbor is because when you're trying to connect heaven and earth, it kind of starts here and now, and your neighbor is in the room with you, and so like my wife and my children, they're closest, and then my coworkers are next closest, and I can try to love the people who haven't been born yet, who will be born on the other side of the planet in 200 years, but they're pretty far away, and maybe they're the enemy of the goal that I have to provide clean water, and I can love them too. But the best way to do that, to connect it, is to pay attention, to bring that same spirit in the here and now with the people who are immediately near to me. At least that's that's my go-to move right now. So that's kind of my response. Because I would say when I try to love all people equally, it means that I'm ignoring my wife and children. Right? Like I'm treating the people who died thousands of years ago, or the people who aren't even born in 100 years, I could be loving them equally. That means I'm loving people. I'm I'm loving people who are not here in this reality, right here and right now, and sacrificing my relationship with my wife and children who are here and now, right? And that doesn't seem like the right move.
I wonder if that's what we're supposed to do. We're just incapable of doing it. Like I remember, um, I get like this little. I've got this little core memories from being a kid going to Bible studies. One of the is my pastor, shout to Pastor Sam, is spent like weeks on end talking about Ephesians, and there's a verse in there somewhere that talks about how to come to realize the breadth, the width, the length of the love of God, and how endless it is. And now it's just it's endless. The love of God is endless, and what you're describing sounds like we're not capable of having this endless love, this to love everyone equally sufficiently will mean that we'll fall short in loving people the right way, so to speak. But
And
I feel like is that I feel like that's a good picture image for the fall of just this. We're just incapable of loving properly, and yeah,
so, so part of the reason I moved boxes from Huntsville to this home was that we were laying in bed, and there was a bass music. It's 11 p.m. and the kids are all sleeping, and my wife and I are. This has like been happening 2 and 3 nights in a row, and so the next day, uh, my my wife confronts my neighbor. Speaking of neighbors, and she's very nice and nicely asks um, that she could turn the bass down at night, and the neighbor was very defensive, and so we decided it's like, well, um, we don't want those people to be our neighbor. So there's another move there where um, I personally don't want to. Uh, there's certain neighbors I would prefer over other neighbors. Like I would prefer to. I'm a bit of an elitist. I would prefer there's an ideal neighbor, and I can try to be that, and I can try to seek them out, and it would be cool if people trying to be the ideal neighbor could find each other and cooperate effectively in order to bring about the most good possible within the smallest amount of time within our own lifespan. So there's a part of that in me as well, where I have a different um, perspective than Paul Vanderklay. It's just different, but I think there's inarguably there are trade-offs. So yeah,
yeah, there are always trade-off out there.
yeah. Let's see. So Christian did respond to you. I think yes. Those who are naturally inclined toward one direction should invest themselves to some degree in at least understanding the perspective of those naturally inclined toward the other direction. There we go. Yeah, I mean, it's like the first step is love, right? And if you're doing that, I don't like. I think Paul says he'll be judged one day, right? And so he he he's comfortable with the decisions he's making, and is, if they're rooted in love and love of God and love of your neighbor, then you, he's seems fine to me, right? Like there's a to me there's a always approached like morals as far as like bare minimum. What's the bare minimum you could do? And it's like in my mind originally it was you can go off in the woods and try to live by yourself and cause no harm to anybody else, and then maybe you avoid hell or something like that. But then once then you can start loving, trying to be a loving person. but then that can be dangerous too. All of a sudden, you start trying to be a loving person, and you end up with good intentions harming people, right? So you could give that homeless, drunk, crazy person the money to buy the alcohol that leads to them dying.
Yeah.
Um, every life has an immeasurable potential. So it's a yeah.
I
Hey,
think.
Christian,
Hey, how's it going?
Hi,
glad you're
Christian.
here.
Good, good, good. Got some thoughts about some of this stuff, but sorry, kind of was like I was out of the YouTube video for a little bit, and then I popped in, so I don't know if I missed a bunch of stuff that you guys were talking about.
Now
But
jump right in, brother.
Yep. Go
yeah,
ahead.
just about that like directionality stuff and how, let's say, like Paul is approaching his he's kind of inclined towards that the drunk person, right, the homeless drunk person or whatever, and then some of us might be more inclined towards sort of more big picture approaches or something like that, right? That's kind of what I mean by like by the top down versus bottom up is like um, I find myself I'm more naturally inclined towards, well, I kind of ebb and flow between the two, and it depends on the what's being talked about. But I always come back to this conclusion, right? That really it's all about me just uh, connecting with people, individuals, one on one, and that eventually it's going to, trickle up, right? The change that I want to see in the world, or something like that, right? The world would be a better place if individuals just started treating each other in certain ways. And I have zero faith in sort of top down um, things being effective at all. Whereas I have I have a couple friends who are much more oriented towards a top down approach with certain things, right? They have very little faith in changes happening at the individual level having any sort of macro level effect. So it's really interesting because, I don't dismiss them outright. They're very close friends of mine. So I got to see from kind of an early age that, like, okay, this is interesting. Like, I shouldn't just dismiss a certain approach just because it's from a different direction from mine, because we would have the same sort of ideal outcome, right? Just the starting point and the method to get to that ideal outcome are very different. And I maybe for a little while I was, but I'm not sort of so conceited to assume that my perspective is the right perspective and the other perspective is the wrong one, right? I'm like, okay, well, if we're naturally inclined towards these different approaches to this problem, that's actually a good thing, right? It's like I like to imagine that individuals, especially if we think of things in terms of Christianity, because I thought about this in terms of denominations and different theologies and doctrines and stuff like that too, is that like we're all inclined towards a certain perspective, and it's almost like we're akin to fingers on God's hand, right? And fingers are only effective when they are to some degree independent, right? So if all my fingers are moving in exactly the same direction, I can't really do much with that, right? Like especially my thumb, for my thumb to be effective, right? Like they're in some way, my thumb and my other finger here are acting against each other, but towards the same end, right? Like this is how I'm able to grab things. And so I think in a similar way, people, um, if we're too much focused, and this is where when you guys mentioned the balance thing, that's exactly right. It's very important where it's like balance and loving your enemy. It's that we have to both recognize what we're naturally inclined to do and sort of embrace that and strengthen that and whatnot, but also understand that someone else could be naturally inclined towards a different approach, and that um, I should encourage them to also pursue that while not uh, dismissing my own inclination. And the very process of um, participating towards that goal in a almost competitive approach, even though it's cooperative, competitive in a way, like sports or whatever. That's like a really, it's a manifestation of love, right? This understanding of this other person who they're naturally inclined in this other way. I might not really understand that other. I might not understand what it's like to be naturally inclined to that other direction, but I can understand at least that that person is naturally inclined that way, and that by participating with each other, understanding each other, and even having a degree of like mercy and forgiveness towards each other when those opposing inclinations sort of become maybe like offensive towards each other, right? That's the best way towards achieving some end. And yeah, those are just kind of like, I've been thinking about this kind of stuff a lot, but my thoughts are kind of scattered. But
it seems like you're pointing out a trap, like, because there's a part of me that thinks, oh, there's a way of being that's wrong, all right, and then so there's a and so you're pointing out a potential trap we can fall into, where basically you can have two people who are good, smart, doing everything, doing a lot of things really well, doing a lot of good work, producing a lot of good fruit, and then but have different goals. And a trap would be to look down on the other person, even because of their differences. That's a trap we could avoid. But then I would say this. So there's like some kind of a meta thing here, where there's a as we transform through the Holy Spirit, learning and growing, we identify traps and learn to avoid them, and maybe help people who are stuck in them, help them get out, things like that. And so then so as individuals who are different, there are people who have been on the path longer than other people. And so if you take someone, what you can do is, like, a mistake you can make is you can take someone who wants to do top down, and they've not been on the path. They haven't had a very good path. They're in many different traps. They've failed to emerge from those traps, and having been in them yourself, you can see, and they're wanting to do things top down, and they can really mess things up. Even if they had turned around and said, "I'll start by cleaning my room," then maybe they would at least begin to get out of their traps. So you have to be the people who are doing the things top down. They have this potential to really mess things up. And so when Chad says to Mark, "I don't trust you," right? That's basically it. It's like are you the kind of person that can be at the top and avoid being corrupted by it? Are you the kind of person who has went through many of these traps and are able to get out of them? And so we could talk about the traps, and we could actually make it a kind of spiritual study, so that the goal at the end of the day is to be able to identify what it means to become a good leader who has earned through this learning, as development of wisdom, has earned the I don't want to call it right, but they've earned this capacity to serve in a top-down structure, which has a lot of potential to do a lot of good, but simultaneously has a lot of potential to do a lot of harm. And so we need to each try to become people who develop as individuals, and then also be able to identify people who do that, because we do have these hierarchies that are corrupted, right? So yeah, and you look around, and I don't know, it's like, how many hierarchies exist that aren't corrupted? And then, right, so this wanting of a proper hierarchy is good, but it requires this kind of acknowledgement of the traps, and an ability to identify people who have been on the path for a long time. And so that's what comes to mind.
And there's certainly, I think it would be good to actually spend some time focusing on the traps. even like on both ends, right? Because let's say at the individual focus, the sort of bottom-up focus, it seems that the traps are probably to some extent there's some overlap, right? Because if you're a person who, let's say, starts out as a bottom-up person, and through understandably perceiving that there is corruption or at least inefficiencies in those higher up in the hierarchy, you could very easily develop some resentment and bitterness, contempt, and ultimately pride that puts you in a mindset where you're like, where then you're going into this idea that, okay, well, if only I was the person that was at the top of the hierarchy, right, then I could set it all straight. It's like, you can, I think, to some degree, gratitude is likely has something to do with making yourself resilient against the traps, right? So I think we're all inclined towards falling into some sort of trap at some point. We can all become bitter, resentful, contemptuous, prideful, blah blah blah. And I think the degree to which we keep ourselves grounded in gratitude and in anything that we approach, especially those things where, let's say I identify that something in this hierarchy is corrupt, and I believe that it could be done better, and I believe that it should be done better, and I believe that it's important that whatever this thing is done better. Before I take that leap towards putting together my grand scheme for how it could be done better, right? I need to make sure, like, how am I being oriented here? Like, what am I allowing to possess me right now? Like, what is motivating me right now? That's another thing I kind of am inclined to think, is that we're all kind of possessed to some extent by something at all times, right? Like, we're not like spontaneously coming up with these new things purely out of ourselves, right? There's something that is influencing us, and we're deciding whether or not we're going to be influenced by this or by that, whether consciously deciding or whether just being sort of unconsciously nudged or something. I think the degree to which you keep yourself grounded in gratitude is the degree to which you keep yourself resilient to some pretty bad pathways in life. Like in Genesis 4:7 or 4:3 or something like that, where God is telling Cain, right, like, if you do what is right, will you not be accepted? If you don't do what is right, sin is crouching at your door. Its desire is to have you, but you must master it. And it always strikes me there where, like, God's focus is on the positive, right? God's focus is on, like, if you do what is right versus if you do not do what is right. So he's not talking about, like, don't do what's bad, don't do what's wrong. He's saying, like, just focus on doing what you know is right. In other words, like, you saw that Abel got Abel's gift was received better than yours may have been, right? So when you saw that, you should have been like, like, now I know how I can more fully bless the Lord my God. Like, right, if I model maybe my future actions off of what Abel did, like, I can be grateful for this experience, even though, right, it's understandable that I'm bitter and resentful about the fact that my gift or my sacrifice wasn't accepted in the way that Abel's was. Still, the proper orientation would be something rooted in gratitude. Okay, Abel's just given me, God's response to Abel was a way for God to show me how I can grow closer to him. Thank you, Lord. Here's what show me how I can keep heading in that direction, as opposed to whatever. But anyways, yeah, gratitude is, I think, central to avoiding the traps, or at least dealing with them effectively.
Yeah, I think you might have stumbled upon something what think gratitude helps you to, because using the Cain story, if he had the perspective that God was encouraging him to have, which is focusing on, instead of seeing Cain as the reason why his sacrifice wasn't accepted, it could have seen Cain as a positive example of how a sacrifice can be accepted. It's like you're saying gratitude is a cheat code to loving your enemy. It's kind of how I'm seeing it, and that helps to avoid a lot of the traps.
So there's a gratitude can be a trap. So I'll just throw that in. So the reason it can be a trap. So the thing that is really important is the feedback. So you have a goal of trying to serve God, and then you have an example of how to do it better, and that's a kind of feedback on how you can course correct and do error correction, and you can be grateful for that. But I would say a trap would be that you could kind of trick yourself into being grateful in such a way that you ignore the feedback. And what's interesting is that we have this bias within us, such that a feedback that basically says you made a mistake, kind of a first impulse is to become defensive, especially if it could be you could be receiving it uh, from some other human who's directly providing feedback, and it could be going against your view of what was right. And so it's actually there's this switch. There's this. So you start off with this defensiveness, and then you have to somehow receive that feedback and process it and attempt to compare it against your goals, like serving God, and say, if is that feedback valid? Maybe you need to make plans for the future to try to practice doing something different so that you can test whether it was valid. And then, but you also then have to move at that point into being grateful for someone having provided the feedback, whether it was right or wrong. It's something that you can use to try to wrestle with transforming toward the good. So you don't want to move into gratitude too early, and you don't want to be so clingy to gratitude that you aren't willing uh, to uh, to experience that becoming defensive and having someone essentially assault your entire being of who you are, such that you can remake it into something better. So yeah, that's
That's a good point. That's a good point, because there was a Q&A that Paul did a few months back, and one of the questions I asked was something like, because one of Jordan Peterson's rules in one of his books was something like, do not allow yourself to become bitter, resentful, blah 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 stuff. And my question was, like, is there a place for that though? Like, is there? Because I've had some tragedies in my life where the reason that I am now so grateful for having come out the other end of them is because I like embraced them in the moment, right? Like I refused to accept like kind of pithy responses from people of like, oh, they're in a better place. Oh, the Lord works in mysterious ways. Oh, they're, like these sort of like canned responses, which are understandable. And it's nice that people kind of do them, but it was just, I said, I told myself like, no, I'm going to experience this grief to the fullest that I can experience it. And so, and I think you are, I think I know what you're saying, Gavin, about with the not embracing or not going with the gratitude too early on. When it comes to gratitude in the wake of suffering, especially, in order to have the fullest gratitude possible for that suffering, you have to have experienced that suffering in the fullness of that suffering, right? To the degree that you're willing to actually admit the fact that, okay, this is bullshit. Like what I'm experiencing, like this is terrible. Like I don't understand why this is happening to me. Blah blah blah, whatever, right? And I'm not just sitting there saying like, like as my arm is being sawed off, I'm not going, oh, I'm so thankful. This is great. Like, oh, this is wonderful. It's like no, this stuff is really horrible.
Toss in Jocko Willink saying good. The other day I was thinking about sharing the good video, and I'm like, I'm not going to share it because this person might have goals that I don't agree with. I don't want to share this video and reinforce them saying good. But so that's when you mentioned gratitude, I was thinking about the Jocko Willink good video. And it's like, I don't want to motivate people and to not learn, right? And not to change their ways. Like even Jocko, like perhaps he was saying good when he could have stepped back and said, oh man, I should feel bad. Right. I made a mistake. Yeah. I should be suffering right now instead of switching my brain into a good. So
exactly. Yeah. Because I really think that you're by adopting a so-called gratitude mindset too early on, like let's say like in the midst of something even, it is possible to have a sort of like shallow or even false gratitude. Like I grew up in a household of probably some like false humility, right? This sort of blue collar, struggling, paycheck to paycheck, false humility. That was really just like, well, at least I'm not some crooked, uppity, white collar person who runs a business or something like that. So it's like this false humility, and I think it can be the same way with gratitude. You can kind of just like, it's easy for me, especially like I'm someone who I'm largely out of touch with my emotions. It's just kind of like always been something with me. I don't know, but so I can like something can happen, and a part of me just kind of switches, and it's like the thing never happened, right? Like something can happen to me that bothers me, and I just kind of like stuff it down, boom, move on, whatever. But then once I started dating the woman who's now my wife, she would say things once in a while, like, what's going on today? Like, what's bothering you? And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, nothing's bothering me, And then it turns out, right, that like, I'm like thinking, oh yeah, like so and so like said such and such a thing to me at work or something, some stupid thing, and so I can trick myself into thinking like I haven't been offended by someone, or I'm not holding something against somebody, or I can trick myself into thinking that I'm grateful for something when I'm really not. So there's an aspect to all this that's like, I guess especially maybe in this little corner of the internet where we can be kind of heady with stuff and intellectual with stuff, and you can trick yourself into thinking that you can use your intellect to switch on and off like emotional and internal core motivations, when in fact, like no matter what you think in your head, like you could still be motivated completely opposite from that. Yeah, but like I've been rereading some Dostoevsky stuff, Crime and Punishment and Brothers Karamazov, and there's just like, intellectual saints, so to speak, right? These like intellectuals who think that they're above these like emotional responses, and so since they're above those emotional responses to things, they're kind of like not beholden to these like moral laws of good and evil, blah blah blah. And then it turns out like once they do the evil thing, they find out underneath that like, oh, I'm really bothered by the fact that I did this thing. So anyways, yeah, I think it's important to remember that at least for people who find it easy to trick themselves, don't shortchange yourself of true gratitude by thinking you can pretend to be grateful. Because if you do that long enough, then you mistake actual gratitude for the pretending to be grateful.
I want to let Tyler speak. I just want to point back at what I think is most important. It's the feedback. So you mentioned gratitude, and then I provided feedback. So there are people who are not able to receive feedback, and so this is one of the key characteristics of someone who should, who can be a good husband, a good wife, a good father, a good coworker, a good leader. And so this is like, to me, this is key. Because once you're going to make mistakes, and if you are, so the better you are at receiving feedback, which, technology can help with that. This is to point back at crowdsource mail with Jacob Faturechi's project with Paul Vanderklay. But the goal there is to be able to receive feedback. And the reason why people want Paul Vanderklay to be a leader is because he's someone we trust. And if he doesn't want to be a leader, that's okay. But yeah, the feedback seems to be most important, in my opinion. When you put people into the top-down position of power and they are distanced from in their ability to receive feedback, perhaps even because the system has corrupted over time because it can't handle scale, it's a terrible situation. But yeah, I want to let you go, Tayo. What are you thinking? Oh yeah, and Almond Tree said Christian Golden. I love that guy. So there we go.
I wasn't too familiar with Christian Golden, but I also love that guy, so big fan. I've just been sat just soaking it in because I feel like there's been wisdom, well, for me, because I am almost certainly that person that can very easily bullshit themselves into fake gratitude, and it's, well, at the minute I know when I'm doing it, so, but that does not stop me from doing it. It's just like knowing the fact I know that when I'm doing it is currently enough for me to say, okay, all right, at least I'm not at that point where you spoke about where you can mistake genuine gratitude to for the fake gratitude. But also being able to do that trick as a sort of a shield against like some very dark experiences. So it's like a skill that I've built up over time and I'm good at it. So it's, yeah, that you're speaking truth, bro.
I think that's a good point, Tayo. Like people will do these things that we think can be a trap and can be bad, but there's a reason we do the things we do, right? So it's like it, even the looking down, like the condemnation. You got to be careful with your measure because it'll be measured upon you. I think just got to be careful with it. So yeah, it can be a trap, and you can identify things as trap, but you can also do that in a non-condemning way. That's probably the love your enemy piece there, because a lot of times your enemy is just someone who has been conditioned um, into a way of behaving that uh, maybe you've avoided it or have passed through. And so, yeah, I don't know. It's difficult. What do you do about that? I've heard Chad talk about the pit, which is alcoholism, and the goal of being able to go help people who are in that pit. And it's like, well, there's all these pits, there's all these traps. And then it's like, mine's this trap of uh, being an arrogant son of a bitch. It's like I've passed through that one, and I'm trying to get out of it to some degree. And then I tend to associate with people who are very similar, and sometimes it's I don't even know how to help people out of a trap that I've gotten out of. Right. So what do Tayo mentioned this we talked about this gratitude trap, and it's like, don't even know how. Well, I don't have as much personal experience with it, but I have personal experiences with other traps, and sometimes it's not even obvious how you can help someone um, handle the thing that we've been conditioned into to some degree. Just stating how hard it can be.
That's for sure.
Well, that brings to mind another reason that loving your enemy is so important. Well, two things. Like, one is that how frequently do we misidentify enemies? right? Like someone we think is an enemy, but they're really not. And then the second is like, how often are we like our own worst enemy, right? So it's like, if we get in the habit of not loving the enemies that are external to us, right? Then when we come to a realization where we've been our own enemy, I think it might be more difficult for us to be loving and forgiving towards ourselves in those moments, right? But to tie it back into the feedback, getting feedback from people, right? And criticism from people and being edified, and iron sharpens iron and all that. Like, I think you not only do this other person, no, you not only do yourself a disservice if you don't properly orient yourself towards feedback, right? So somebody's, because almost all the time when I get like negative feedback for at least some period of time, that person is my enemy, right? For at least some period of time, whether or not they're really my enemy is, from my perspective, that person is my enemy. It could be just like some stupid tweet that I see, and then I'm like, all right, I just need to delete Twitter. I'm done. or something more serious, right? Like, so not only am I doing myself a disservice by robbing myself of the opportunity to learn from that situation positively, or see if that person has something that I need to hear, right? Or that I need to be corrected on this thing. Like, the reason I'm getting this negative feedback is because this person is actually right. Maybe like Gavin, like you said, maybe they've been through this or something like this before, so they're kind of like steering me, kind of lovingly in some way, and I'm just refusing to see it that way, like maybe like Cain. But I'm also robbing that other person of the fruit that they might be able to receive by me receiving their edification, right? It's kind of like, because I know for myself, when I've tried to provide like feedback to somebody to correct them on something that they've said or whatever, like, oh, actually, like, did you see blah blah blah? Like, I understand what you're saying, but this, maybe 2% of the time, the other person is like, oh, I hadn't really thought, whatever, like they come around to some extent, at least to understand this other perspective, and that's a blessing for me, just to know that, okay, like, they now at least understand this other perspective. But if I refuse that kind of, like, if I was that other person and I refuse to hear me out, right, I rob myself of understanding another perspective. And by robbing myself of understanding another perspective, I rob myself of an opportunity to love, right? But I also rob the other person of receiving that blessing accordingly. So it's like, yeah.
I'm glad you brought that up. The last time I was doing it, just chatting, I was pointing at Steelman. And what's funny is Mark was providing feedback to me, and we weren't clicking. And it's because I was actually using the word Steelman in a confusing way. Because when you're trying to love God and love people, as you said, Christian, you can listen and try to understand. Like, that's actually how I try to love God. I try to listen to God, but that's also how we can try to love other people, is be able to listen and understand people. And so for me, I was calling that a still man. And when you fail to listen and understand people, I was calling that a straw man. But the straw man, still man language is connected to, the skill of arguing and arguing over ideas and thoughts. It's not usually connected to the idea of just knowing another person and what's going through their mind. So, but yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because as the step before being able to receive feedback is actually loving the other person and listening to the other person. And then something even maybe before that, which I think Mr. Jacob Faturechi has helped identify, and Paul Vanderklay have helped identify, is that this medium of being able to see our facial expressions and hear our tone is more conducive for us being loving than text only communication, for example. So it's a better medium. So yeah, those are three really important things. And to connect it back into this bottom up, top down systems of corruption and trying to become good leaders and identify good leaders. It's like, well, it'd be nice if our leaders did this, right? Maybe that's why we trust Paul's. We see Paul doing this. But you look out, whether it's your city or county, state, whatever, we're not really seeing this kind of demonstration of a person who has the capacity to love other people, right? If you can't even love other people, you most certainly aren't loving God, right? Like, yeah, it would be nice. Like, it would be so nice to be able to see our candidates, for example, do conversations like these instead of just performing some type of show. But yeah, that's me trying to connect it all up together. And I'm glad y'all are here. Glad it's not just text. You're different, Christian, when you got text coming through. This Christian down here in the text is different than the one
Very different.
facial expressions and tone
true.
of voice is coming through.
Yeah, no, it's weird how that makes. I mean, I guess it's not really weird, but it really does make a lot of difference. Like, but it's kind
There's
of
this thing called evolution.
yeah.
Perhaps
This,
we did not involve to do text messaging.
yeah. I like what got me on like making a YouTube channel in the first place, whatever it was, a couple years ago, was that sort of thing where being in like the text only realm was just very kind of cold and dead, you know, like I mean, when I started my YouTube channel, I just did like music stuff. It was just worship music, and that was more of like I can have this sort of perfectionist mindset when it comes to anything related to art, where I'm just like I can't let it go. I can't let anybody listen to it till it's perfect. And then like COVID struck, and I was just like, whatever. I'm just gonna start throwing YouTube videos out there, and but even like before that, I was thinking of making a YouTube channel because I saw whatever Jordan Peterson like having these 3-4 hour long videos, Joe Rogan having these like 4 hour long videos, and Lex Friedman, and I'm just like, this is amazing. Like, I've always wanted to see this kind of stuff. I assumed nobody else was interested in this at all, so I never even thought of doing anything like this. I was just like, nobody wants to hear people just like talk about stuff. I don't know, but apparently people did, and it really does make a big difference. Like I've read some of Jordan Peterson's work, and it's good, but it's more interesting watching him actually in conversation with somebody. Like if Lex Friedman wrote a book, right, I might or might not buy it, but I'll watch him have conversations with people. Likewise with Joe Rogan. Like I probably would never buy a Joe Rogan book. It just wouldn't really interest me. But
I would add one more. I'd rather have a conversation with you two than listen to Jordan Peterson or Lex Friedman. So
no, agreed.
That's the other thing I realized is like I don't listening to other people have a conversation. I've always been wanting to jump in or to say some idea that comes up because it's not it doesn't make sense with what they're saying, and I have no ability to do that unless I'm actually having a conversation, participating, right? Not being audience. So the fact that we're figuring out how we can, step out of the audience and participate, I think that's really cool.
Yeah, like I have these two friends in particular who, ever since we've been friends, like if we go to a get together or some kind of party or something like that, like we're always just like off in the corner talking about stuff the whole time, right? And yeah, there's just something so if you're someone who's naturally inclined towards having conversations like that, because some people just don't, some people just, maybe most people, I don't know, are just not really into having discussions about stuff like this, right? A lot of people are more interested in having more like lighthearted sort of conversations. I used to call them like superficial conversations, but I think that's a bullshit way of looking at them. But people are just like, people are more or more interested in talking about the more concrete sort of like everyday stuff, which is great because that means they're actually experiencing life.
Well, I mean, there's an aspect of this loving people kind of thing where I'll encounter people and try to start having what a quote unquote real conversation, and I'm not being heard or listened to, which shows me like this. I was willing to listen and love, but you didn't reciprocate, and it's like, well, I don't want to be here, right?
Yeah.
It's similar to what happened in Huntsville, Alabama, with my neighbor. It was like there was no reciprocation, no loving kindness reciprocation. It's like, I don't want to be here, right?
Yeah.
I want to be with people who are practicing, being possessed by the Holy Spirit, together, trying to cooperate together in order to amplify the amount of good fruit that's being produced in order to become more than the sum of the parts, things like that. But that might just be my different perspective, and I'm not looking down on people who do it different. It's just, that's my calling. I guess.
Like Christian said, we need both perspectives. We need people looking from the top, people building top down, people building bottom up. Both are needed.
Yeah, we only have so much bandwidth too, right? Like there's only like some people seem to be more capable of blending the two perspectives, right? And kind of like being like a middleman, right, of the two perspectives. I kind of find myself more in that lane, but probably more in the what we're doing here, right? I'm like more naturally in this sort of realm. But I have this like bizarre background where I grew up, like I said before, I grew up like very blue collar and stuff like that, where it's like, I'll be working with my father who's a Mason, right? And I was like, how old was I when I was first working with him? Like 15 years old, maybe 14. And it'd be like me and him and like 10 other guys, whatever, doing stuff. And it was like little like Yoda moments, I called them, where like just be doing stuff and then randomly just come out with this like profound, wise statement in the middle of like, laying a block or something. And so it's like, but their primary jurisdiction isn't quite the right word, but like their primary realm in which they are not only most naturally inclined towards, but also most productive in and most effective in, is that sort of less I don't know what the right word is for it. Like I want to say like less intellectually deep, but like I guess the less like abstracted. Hold on a second. Less abstracted, more concrete, literally. And that's like their whole bandwidth, right? Like the whole bandwidth is taken up in that.
There's like
sort
this
of like,
embodiment thing. So you
yeah. Oh. I don't know what happened.
I think StreamYard blew up.
Oh, I can't hear you now.
Oh.
I don't know what happened.
I think StreamYard blew up. Can you hear me now, Christian? Test, test.
Test 1, 2, 3.
So I think Christian's mic messed up. Not his mic, but his audio.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think StreamYard blew up. That was
Yeah.
once you can you hear us now, Christian?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Welcome
You guys
back.
hear me okay?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. I was when I lost you there, it was you're working with your father doing masonry work. Not to be confused with those who might be in the 33rd degree, but just plain old masonry work, right? And then you're you're basically embodying this thing, and it's so you're non-abstracted embodiment. And then what's interesting is when you're actually like growing food in a garden, building something with your hands. There's this wisdom that you can learn. So it sounds like that's the kind of wisdom, these little wisdom nuggets, these little Yoda moments that can happen when you're actually building something, which it's hard to do in this space. But I happen to be a software engineer who worked with remote teams of people who do software engineering together, and so those wisdom moments can happen. It just depends on your line of work. You can't really do masonry remotely like that, but yeah, I like the idea of people working together. It makes me think of Michael Sartori, and he wants to pursue kind of a trade school where I would imagine that trying to embody the right way of being would reveal these wisdom moments that can be connected to teachings that are in the Bible, for example, right? No matter what you're doing, if you're trying to do good work, produce good fruit, I can't help but think there's wisdom that can be extracted. Treating each moment as sacred. How are you doing, Chad?
I'm good. I don't know. I think my connection is kind of goofy for some reason. It hasn't been goofy in this building before.
Maybe one of those solar flares.
Hey, bring it on, Mitch.
So yeah, we're all preparing to be better leaders, so that when the solar flare happens, we can go out and be of service in our community.
Yeah. I worked for a dude who I was in the program with, and he was like, it was great because he was like an old timer, and it was a lot like kind of what Sartori kind of what I think his project is, But we would just drive around and go from job to job and just be talking about God and stuff all day, and like different kinds of experiences and getting practical and hands on with helping others. He talked a lot about like let's do random acts of kindness and stuff. There he is. There's the man himself.
I heard my name and then you summoned me.
I did.
I think your name was mentioned 3 times. That's how many it takes.
Well, I heard Gavin say it, and then I missed the last 30 seconds or so trying to log in here. So.
Glad you're here.
Excuse me.
We were
I probably don't have very good service here, so.
Yeah, I think Chad has the same issue.
Sorry.
And he also has another issue in his lungs. But Christian was saying how he remembers being about 15 years old and doing masonry work with his father, and all of a sudden there'd be what he called these Yoda moments where there'd be some wisdom. Sounds like it was some kind of wisdom that was related to the work that's being done. It was embodied, non-abstract wisdom, but and then it seemed connected to what you're interested in with this trade school idea.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, I mean, I think, when you're just sitting like in the ivory tower and everything you're thinking about is like in the theoretical, you lose sight of like the really basic stuff of how things actually have to work and how it has to relate to, even the people at the bottom of the system and working in trades and things like that. That's the kind of common sense that you don't you don't lose sight of. So then if you're going to explore theology and things like that, it's going to, it, like sometimes it'll be counterintuitive, but you have to, it has to relate to the things that you know to be true, I guess. So.
Chad, I muted your mic. Yeah. There's when you when you when you mess up in the real world, you end up experiencing pain. But whenever you are in this abstract land and you make mistakes, there's no direct experience and no direct feedback. We were talking about feedback earlier. So yeah, when you're actually embodying things and you hit your thumb with a hammer, that's a mistake. And and I've done it a few times.
I think that connects back to Christian's point earlier about faking gratitude, because you're, by not allowing yourself to feel the depth of the pain before being able to appreciate the true gratitude. It's like this, you're not embodying the reality of the situation to truly then appreciate the gratitude that you can get from it.
Yeah, I could imagine like hitting my thumb with a hammer and saying, "It feels so good. I'm so grateful."
Yeah,
No,
there's
you're not.
even that reminds me too, like if you hit your thumb with a hammer once, right? And then the next time you go to swing the hammer, you're a little more careful, right? And in a sense, that's a demonstration that you have valued that experience of hitting your thumb sufficient enough to where you're being careful the next time. And if I'm being corrected by someone, if someone's giving me feedback, and I'm saying that I accept their feedback and I accept their criticism without being bitter or resentful, but then the next time I see that person's name pop up in my notifications as a reply to my Twitter comment, inside my heart, I think, like, I don't even want to deal with this person again. Am I really grateful for the fact that they that they corrected me, right? Maybe not.
Well, you
Well, that's
can
not,
you can anticipate some pain though, right? So like, yeah, it's like I know that when my boss sends me a certain kind of message that starts at a certain way, you kind of know what to expect. I don't know how many ladies you may have dated, but you kind of know what it sounds like right before they're about to break up with you. It's like so the experience, you can end up coming out of the experience transformed as a better person, but it doesn't stop you from still having that initial impressions like, oh no, what did I do this time, or something like that. It's like it doesn't feel good to have, for me at least. Like, I don't look forward to making mistakes, and I don't like that feeling of having made the mistake and maybe hurt somebody. But it's better than being ignorant. Even that pain that comes with making that mistake is better than being ignorant and having that blissful ignorance. Which reminds me of a card on some lady's, very nice Catholic lady who took me into her home. The card said, it basically said, you can pray and be blissful. And it rubbed me the wrong way. It's like, I'm not just going to pray and be blissful. It's like, I interrupted you, Chad.
oh, it's okay. I was just thinking of whenever the word gratitude is brought up, I try to think about how, in, like, say, the situation with the hammer, um, how to apply this concept of gratitude. The idea that so when I think of gratitude, I think of it as a pragmatic. I think of it as a call to action. So that's how I see the word gratitude. And um, so yeah, it's hard because I mean, like, for me, it's a lot of, like, I can talk about how grateful I am for for this or that, but if I'm not really doing, like, I can talk about how grateful I am for my home. But if I'm not like keeping it clean or inviting people over, then it's not really great. I'm not really grateful, am I? I'm just kind of saying I am. So I don't know. That's one of the things I was thinking of. So I don't know how it relates to the hammer, but
Well, that reminds me, because this is like, I mean, it's a practice. I guess I haven't felt like I really needed to employ it too much lately because I'm fairly content with most of what's going on in my life. But I remember, when I was in like a really a place where I was really unhappy about a lot of my life circumstances, I realized these are circumstances that are outside of my control. Some of them were. And so I was, thought, well, God's allowing me to be in this circumstance, and I could spend just a lot of time complaining about it, or I could thank him because he's the one that put me in that circumstance. So I started thanking him for all the stuff that I was really unhappy about, which, just the process of like thinking through, like, well, thinking about like, well, these are some ways it could have been worse, and these are some things that maybe I'm being protected from by being in this circumstance, or like some stuff like if a relationship didn't work out with some girl, and then now I'm happily married, and some of those girls from my past, I'm like, whoa, I'm really glad that didn't work out, like stuff like that. But like in the moment, you don't know that, but like through the act of just saying thank you, you become more grateful. And
That's interesting. It's
it
like
doesn't.
everything happens for a reason, but I don't necessarily know that reason yet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, especially if it's something you can't change, and that's the thing, because a lot of us get really caught up on things that we don't have any control about. Like, oh, my parents hadn't done this. It's like, well, you couldn't control what your parents did when you were a kid. You can, obsess over it, or you can kind of, and I'm not saying you have to say thank you for everything, but at least just to say like, that was something that was outside of my control. And so the path forward is not going to be found in dwelling on it and thinking about like, what if things were different? Because they weren't different, So that's part of the way toward being grateful.
Earlier, we spoke about traps, and I said like gratitude was one of my traps, and I think Michael's just laid out one of my strategies, which is I can't control everything, and I don't know everything, so I'm just going to let things go. And it's great, but the trap for me is when I don't do what Chad said, which is action. So I can say yes, I'm grateful for this, and because I don't control it, but then my actions will not reflect the gratitude. For example, um, let me know. This is the internet. Let me know use real. I'll let relationships. Abstract example, relationships. You're dating someone. Uh, it didn't work out. You got the text that starts. You know how it starts, and you're like, oh, okay, here we go again. And this person is attempting to provide feedback by breaking up with you, and um, I can take the mode of when I'm married, I'll be grateful that didn't work out. This just wasn't meant to be, and then ignore and use that as an excuse to ignore the feedback because it's not. This isn't. I'm grateful for the experience, but I'm moving on, and that's the trap that I was trying to point out earlier.
Yeah, that's definitely, I can relate to that because like, so my story was like, I had a whole lot of first dates that I couldn't get a second date. My wife's actually the only woman I went on a second date with. So, I don't know, it was how many it was, like 8 or something. And, sometimes it didn't even get that far going on a real date or whatever. But like, so then, so I was aware like, okay, well, there was some stuff that I did that like, that's why she doesn't want to talk to me anymore. So I was able to kind of like figure that out a little bit. But at the same time, it's like, well, I'm really glad that I was able to learn those experiences by messing up a bunch of first dates rather than getting, committed and involved. And I mean, I probably wasn't too emotionally invested a lot of times anyway, but yeah. So yeah, you got to but that's why I think you have to really differentiate between the things that you can control and the things that you can't control.
So yeah, so like I wonder then is what's the best mode or the purpose of gratitude? Is it so that I feel better, or is it so that um I contribute better in my life? Um, so that to me is something I'm thinking of there. It's like um, is gratitude self-centered thing? So like I don't know if I'm
There's a
spelling this out well.
there's another word, like meaning and purpose. Supposedly there's people going through a meaning crisis, and so like when I hear Chad say that, it's like if it's supposed to make you a better person, then like it actually becomes meaningful if becoming a better person is your aim, right? So, um, and then the meaning it provides can be gratifying, right? So it's not, it's like but yeah, I like what everyone's saying. I like how Tayo reconnected it back to action and what Chad was saying. But yeah, it seems like we just solved the meaning crisis, something like that.
Well, I know I find it so difficult to talk myself into being grateful. I think maybe that's what I was talking about earlier. It's like I can say to myself a million times I'm grateful, but not feel it. But I can also like go against that grain and try and bring positive action into the world. I still might not feel grateful, but at least I know I have done something good. And so it's like it's not about maybe what I'm feeling right now. It's like um, living by principle, a principle. So for me, yeah, that whole frame of gratitude is about trying to act out a particular principle in my life, so that because I know, like, I don't know,
Well,
it's always. Go ahead. Sorry.
I will say, like, when people give me feedback about a mistake I've made, you can actually say thank you and not mean it, right? So it needs to be sincere, and the way it's sincere is to realize is like this person uh, took the time to provide information because they want what's best for me. Um, Now they may be wrong, but that was their intent. So uh, that's what comes to mind. That's We have to make sure that we can get into. This is where I started this whole live stream was about how can we pay attention to our thoughts and feelings and the importance of prayer. We have If you can get those first steps as an individual, then you can get into a place where you change your perspective. So that it's not that you just say you're thankful because you're trying to pretend to be grateful. You actually have to be sincere when you say thank you. To Michael's point about saying thank you, it's like you really you want to be sincere when you do it, and it takes a perspective shift to do that, and it might be real hard to do that.
Well, I think that's what I would say. Being grateful is not selfish because I think really what it is it's having the most like proper understanding of reality. Um, and you could contrast this with like by like or I don't know, just being ungrateful. But a lot of times people are ungrateful for maybe like worry, and like worry is wrong because you're basically believing that you have a better idea of how the future should be than God. And so you are trusting in your own plan that if things worked out the way that you would desire, you would be comfortable with that. But but you're worried because you're afraid that it's not going to work out that way. And I think that stuff like saying thank you to somebody, even when you don't feel like it. I mean, we probably don't realize some of this stuff is that like the real like opposite of that is just like childish behavior that you've outgrown that, and it's probably been so long that you don't realize. But like, you know, so like we think about this stuff as like, oh, this is a common courtesy. Well, it's like, well, common courtesy is something that you had to learn probably by being a kid and having other kids be rude and mean and inconsiderate towards you. And then, you know, but that's like so long ago for most of us, we probably don't think about it. But, you know, because otherwise, how would you get to that idea? Like, I mean, if no one's ever, like, if you have somebody that's like lived such a life of privilege that they've never been corrected until they're an adult, they're not going to just say thank you. They're going to blow up, you know, they're going to react in a terrible way. So I mean, I think that does show, at least it shows some understanding that like it's better to respond to things by saying thank you and not meaning it than it is to just let your emotions do whatever they want.
I probably need to go in about 10 minutes, but I can hand this over to you, Michael, at that time. Let's see. Gratitude as signal of appreciation can be the confirming of a productive neural path at every scale of individual brain and group brain. That's definitely interesting. Like the idea that you can practice something. You can practice expressing gratitude. I do think the sincerity is important. Explaining details of what you are grateful for, wanting to appreciate, helps clarify what you want more of. Yeah, I think we're on the same page. Yeah, Aaron, I've got a little under 10 minutes left unless someone else hops on and hosts. And I don't know what Griswold Grimm is thankful for, but I'm assuming it is sincere.
Practicing gratitude.
But yeah, thanks, Gavin. That feels good. I feel it. Maybe it went across space and time.
This is a sincere one. Hopefully it makes it across the pond. Thank you, Gavin, for hosting. This has been a lot of fun, but I'm going to sign out now as well.
Yeah, thank you for being here, Dario. I appreciate you. So I'm glad you were here.
Thanks a lot.
Have a good one. Coughing like a bastard. Well, I think like the gratitude, like the idea of love, right? It's like that's more of a. Is it more important that it's something that I feel, or is it more important that regardless of what I feel, that if I've made a commitment, then I act it out? So that's what I mean by gratitude as
I think
an
that
action.
what you do is more important. And well, and like I don't know, this is like one of these things you hear in the mega church or whatever. But like there's something like emotions aren't a thermostat or a thermometer. So they tell you what the temperature is, but they don't set the temperature. Your emotions aren't supposed to regulate your life in the way you do, but they will tell you like what's going on. So if you feel ungrateful, then that's like an indicator that there's something about your life that you need to examine. But your actions is what sets it. And that's why I say, like, even just saying that prayer, even if you don't mean it, like praying like for the stuff that you're not happy about, it will change your emotions over time. So
I think I got that. Your emotions are not a thermostat; it's a thermometer. I like that. I don't go to mega churches or give attention to them. So I need people from the mega churches to relay the wisdom thing.
Yeah, well, every once in a while you get a good little pithy saying like that. It's worth hanging on to. So.
Yeah, I like that. Chad, I muted you because Michael's mic was a little quiet, and then the background noise were interfering a little bit. But now I'm unmuting you, Chad.
Oh, okay. Well, excuse me. I'm not sure if I've ever had the wisdom to notice when I'm ungrateful, to be quite honest. Like I'm sure I know I've been ungrateful, but I'm not sure I've ever noticed it while it's happening.
Oh man, that's a good one to be able to do. I was pointing at Aaron had asked some question earlier and about becoming. The way I took the question from memory is, how do I get better at improving? I would say my relationship with God, for example, and I mean the word in this corner would be prayer, and I would emphasize the prayer related to listening. And so being able to identify, I'm going to mute you, Chad,
Yep.
but being able to identify that that unholy spirit, Chad, so being able to notice like the Holy Spirit and notice the unholy spirit, like notice those emotions, notice, the relationship between thoughts and emotions, and even what you're receiving on set or wherever you're giving your attention, and those spirits, noticing how that influence gets into your mind. That seems like kind of a step one, like level one. So yeah, being able to notice the unholy spirit, that was one of my first steps, like in being able to be more inviting with the Holy Spirit was simply being able to notice and then reject the unholy spirit. The unholy spirit that wants to go and get revenge, or wants to, to go punish the person, the thing that all of a sudden I become angry, uncontrollable anger, or whatever it is, that being able to notice them and say, that's not the one I want. Right. And doing that and rejected them until I get to the one that seems to be related to, Galatians and the fruit of the Holy Spirit, and seems to be related to that Proverbs 6:16-19. I'm sure there's a bunch of places throughout the Bible where it talks about, the right way of being and what that looks like, it's different than when a human is possessed with an unholy spirit. So seems like an important thing, this prayer, and this careful listening and attending to what's going on, that ability to do introspection. There's a bunch of language for it, but as far as like in this corner with Christianity and Judaism, maybe even Islam, it seems like the prayer where you're listening to God and trying to do that constantly is the key to being able to identify, what's possessing you right now.
Yeah, I would say just being ungrateful, it's not the only thing that's like opposed to gratefulness. Like, I mean, like the way I think of it, like if you think about like a kid that's like throwing a tantrum, you'd be like, why are they so ungrateful? But also like, greediness, or just like that's the thing, what advertising does when you watch ads and it makes you want a thing you didn't want before. Now you're ungrateful for whatever you had before.
Michael's got a lot of work. Hey, Nahama, and guys, I'll remove myself here in a couple minutes and just leave the stream rolling, and just be in the back office. But I should be out of a meeting within about 30 minutes. But yeah, I'm glad you're here, Nahama. How are you?
Thank you. Good. It's good to see you.
Yeah.
I saw Michael was here, so I actually him for a little bit of time now. So I'm just popping in real quick. But it's nice to see you all.
Yeah, thanks for hopping in.
I'm at a noisy construction site, so. Somebody's making a bunch of noise. Oh.
It happens. And my
I
children
know
would
we're
be.
talking about grad.
Oh, we got another one. Go ahead, Nahama. I interrupted you.
No problem. I'm good. I just set up a new mic, so I make sure it's working well. Yep.
Hey, Shane.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Oh, you could. Okay. Michael, I have a question for you. I'm not sure if it was you or if it was another Michael, but a couple weeks back, you who's working on a program, like a daily study program for Christians? Or was that somebody else?
Yes. Well, yeah. So I'm kind of starting to work on a program. And it's like going to be like a kind of like a trade school that uses biblical principles and kind of combined teaching of the Bible while learning a skill. And so I'm starting to work on that. Projected start is like 2024, but I'm writing materials and things like that to start too. So. I don't know if my connection is dropping out. Can you hear me? I think it's being weird. So.
I never know if it's the connection or if it's my earpods or what, but I heard you, Michael.
Okay. Yeah. I'm on cell phone data, so it's pretty unreliable a lot of times. So I can never tell if it's my phone or if something else is going on. But
I'm back. I'm sorry, I missed you right when you started talking about it.
oh, okay. Yeah. So my idea was for a trade school to help teach like at the same time like biblical principles and teach people about the Bible, while also learning a useful trade. So because I kind of went to a program like that, but it was like an internship at a big church, but they didn't teach us any useful skills unless if you wanted to work at a church. That was the only thing they taught you. So but I think combining the two is kind of a good, everybody seems to think it's a good idea since I've mentioned it. So I'm gonna go with it.
No, it's really interesting because I caught you talking about it a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It reminded me of a program that we have in the Jewish community for about a century now, sort of this decentralized study program. It's called, and I was wondering, because it's been around and established, I thought it would be perhaps worthy of mentioning to you because I know you're sort of just putting this together.
Sure.
And it might be useful for some inspiration or some of the setup. You could kind of maybe take pieces of it that you like and incorporate it. It's called Daf Yomi, which translates to a page a day. And so you have men all over the world, and it's been around for a century. So early 1920s is when it was first started, and you have men all over the world who basically do it themselves, do it with a partner. You have study groups, you have groups in person, you have groups online. It's very like versatile at how you want to interact with this thing. But like centrally, it's just like 1 page a day, so like 20-minute commitment, you know. It happens to be a 7-year cycle. So that's just because I think Chazi or Jacob would know this much better, but I think it's like the entire Tanakh. But, you know, I don't know, maybe a year cycle would be more appropriate for something. But it's just, it's such a good program. And then, you know, after the cycle is over, they have like this huge event at a place like Madison Square Garden or something like that. And it's this giant celebration. It's very much, it's one of those programs that like, it's the barrier to entry, it's like so easy to participate. And it's just like a really great way to like bring this learning into your everyday life without having to like do anything too major. But then the accomplishment at the end is amazing. It really binds men together in the community. Like if you're traveling somewhere, you could join, you know, you might want to like, you'll just like join the local group for that day. And like, it's this instant connection. And, you know, and then they have this huge celebration for all the men afterwards. It's like really lovely. So I just was hearing a lot of parallels in like what you were talking about. And I was like, oh, that's so cool. That's a great idea. And it's been done successfully here. So I just wanted to mention it.
Yeah,
Do you have,
spell it in the chat or something so I can look it up right?
yeah, hang on a second. Let me open in the StreamYard or YouTube.
You can put it in.
Let me do it
If
in
you
the,
could put it on there, it goes to the other thing. I think so.
oh, if I put it in the StreamYard,
Yeah.
hold on.
Something
me
I'm curious
back.
about, I don't know whether it's consistent or varies, but it would be something that I would want to look into if I was thinking about doing what you're talking about, Michael, which it's very exciting to me to think that there could be a sort of revival of these type of shepherding, mentoring, whatever this is, men helping men become men things, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
one of the things that I see as a potential hazard that technology might be able to help remedy is helping each student to be as independent as possible, because one of the liabilities of being plugged into so there's such benefit from being plugged into a group, a network, right? Because it allows you to have access to more skills and experience, and really perhaps more importantly than that is employment, right? People would come to the greater organization and say, hey, I need these things, and then the organization would say, well, guess what, we have people that we've trained up to do that. And so it could be a hub for people who are seeking the work that you've trained people to do. That would be a great asset. And at the same time, it's also an opportunity for I mean, I hate to use a word like exploitation, but in the sense that I've seen a lot of organizations that were specifically nonprofit end up almost preventing the individual from ever having a profitable, like, and entrepreneurial like thing. And so with modern technology, you could still be the hub and provide all of the things that source of employment would provide, while also allowing each individual to be as much an independent contractor as possible, so that they weren't sort of falling into the ruts that being a very low in a hierarchy can allow somebody to stay at a very entry level position. And it's not that you would expect everybody to be at some high level where they have their own business and they're really killing it. Some people just want to haul water and chop wood, and amen. Like,
Yeah.
I like that too. By the same token, you don't want somebody to be pigeonholed into that position because they didn't know the right people or work the system properly. And so I just love the idea of being able to include as part of the education this sense of ultimate responsibility for one's own sort of benefit vocationally.
Yeah. Yeah, I actually, so I put it on Grimgriz server. Most of the stuff I've written up so far. So if you're over there, you can find it and take a look. Or I'm on Discord anyway. But yeah, that was kind of like an idea that I really wanted everything to be decentralized because you know I've been around a couple of these programs, and like The one where I was at a church that was like 500 people, I got to learn how to do a lot of stuff. The one where it was like 5,000 people, there was a lot of people there that really were just, they had to find busy work for students. And so, and I mean, my thought even was that, like, there's a lot of guys that probably from like our parents' generation who started businesses, working in building trades and things like that. And then because this was what everybody said, 30 years ago, is like that they wanted to provide better for their family. They send their own kids to college instead of like joining the family business. And so now all these businesses are kind of dying off. But then there's a lot of guys that aren't going to college as much anymore. It's like 60-40 women graduating with bachelor's degrees over men. So my thought is like, okay, well, you've got guys that are wise, that know how to do this stuff. They're godly men, and you have these young guys that need to learn a profession and need to learn some wisdom, and pair them up. And so that was kind of my thought. So it could happen like, yeah, I want to make the materials. I mean, I want to do this myself too, but like I'm thinking, well, maybe if it's just me to start, like, maybe I can get a couple guys to help me work and kind of start a business, my own business. But it could be, if I make the materials and make them available, and then people could do this kind of thing wherever. So that was kind of the plan. And I think even for people who maybe, if you wanted to be a pastor or something, it's good to have that common sense, like working knowledge, like because like my dad is a pastor in a small church, and it was very useful that he knew how to like do building maintenance and stuff like that. And I think a lot of people graduating college probably don't realize, if you're hired by like a small church or something, you don't know how much responsibility there is outside
wearing
of
a lot of
like
hats.
teaching people the Bible. So yeah, so that was kind of my idea. So
the one thing that I wanted to appreciate about this idea is the sense that particularly with these businesses that have integrity, where they're not this cookie cutter. Like, I don't know if you've been to a mechanic or anything like that. I'm sure even your cabinet making business, there is this tendency to standardize and crank out work, right? And so the artisan is sort of this lost thing. But beyond that, like, you don't get to become an artisan if you don't have relationships, not only with the work itself, but also with your clientele, like with the community that recognizes you as somebody who doesn't oversell and all of that kind of stuff. And so there's this aspect of integrity that is, like, whether you like it or not, it's a spiritual thing. Like, the pride you take in your work is a thing, and not many people are being nurtured to develop that. By the same token, having humility in your reaction with your customer, like being able to say, I don't know the things that I don't know, like that standard of saying there are certain things I'm not going to tolerate, even within my own sort of like process, where if I come up on an obstacle that presents a significant liability to my company or to my customer, I'm going to stop, and we're going to deal with it openly so that everybody knows we're now out of my league. And I didn't anticipate this problem, and we're going to have to do something about it openly. And that way, neither of us is getting hosed in this situation. And that is something that is just 100% absent in my interactions with contractors over the last 10 years that I've been a homeowner. They're scared to say they don't know something. And so they're way over their skis by the time I discover they didn't know what they were doing. And had they just told me, we could have found somebody who did know what they were doing. And so this idea that there's got to be this mutual sort of relational engagement between the provider and the consumer, I don't know how we get that, but it does seem like it's not possible at an institutional level. Like, it really does come down to candid, upfront communication at the time of sort of engagement with the person who's going to do the work for you.
Yeah.
So just to clarify, because I think, Michael, I got cut out earlier when you were explaining this. I had heard initially the study part of it. So you want to do, I just want to make sure I understand this. You want to do like a study and trade thing sort of combined. Something, is that
Mhm.
correct?
Yeah.
Oh, that's so
Yeah,
interesting.
and this is something we were
Okay.
talking about a little bit with like Gavin and stuff, like, you know, because like
Mhm.
this is come from, so I went to Bible college, I learned a lot of stuff, but then a lot of that stuff didn't really like sink in and make sense to me fully until I've started
Yeah.
doing more work like full time with my hands and things like that. And so
Hmm.
I think there is like a connectedness
Ah,
with
yeah.
that, you know, because it takes it from like theoretical application to real life. So
Right.
so that's
Yeah, like all
that was
those
kind of
metaphors that
the
Chad uses with.
yeah,
Yeah, sorry to interrupt
right.
there.
No, well, and that was
Like
even too, you know,
all the
because it's like,
foundational stuff. Yeah.
yeah, I mean everything in the Bible, it's like it's like God tells Noah to build an ark, he tells Moses to build a tabernacle, he tells, you know, and then there's all this stuff about farming and like and potters and all these like things, almost, which we understand the spiritual parts more than we understand the material parts now, because of the way the
Yeah.
world that we live in, you know. So it's not that we have to learn how those, to understand those metaphors, it's not the like spiritual part we need to understand so much as the practical part. So
That in a way sort of brings back the enchantment into the physical world, no?
yeah,
Like when you
yeah,
combine those two elements. Yeah. Oh, that's lovely. Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. The thing that I really love about the Dafyomi program is how it sort of binds this international decentralized community together. And I could see that being super beneficial for the Christian world, because you don't have to be affiliated with a church. You don't have to be like, the program itself is this like underlying foundational decentralized thing that you
Mhm.
can, that, and like the people who participate are everybody from like laborers to like the highest level of rabbi, you know, that everybody knows. And like it's made so that everybody can participate in it. And it's just yeah, I'm like, I don't know, I heard you talking about it, I'm like so excited about it. I think there's so much potential for this. And the adding the trade aspect, I think that's very cool too. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, I feel that way because I feel lucky that I had an opportunity to gain a marketable skill that I could actually make a living off of, because that kind of happened like through happenstance or whatever, which,
Yeah.
so, you know, and I mean, and it's, you know, and that's the thing, like it's making an educational thing, because I feel like that value, yeah, you know, it's going to be useful if you never end up doing that stuff. If you're going to be a homeowner, it's useful. You could learn how to do a trade. Maybe you're not good at working with your hands, but you could learn how to start a business if you're good on the business side of things or whatever. So, like, because everything is now like you have to go to school and then you have to go to college, and then it's like you don't get to start your life until you're like 22, whereas most, you know, before, like people learned so much just growing up because like household chores and things like that were so much more involved, like, you know, in a rural setting. So it's just like common sense stuff, you know, like adulting or whatever, as they say. It's kind of a dumb term, but it works.
Yeah. No, that makes so much sense, especially now that we're all talking about AIs taking over truck jobs and all of this stuff, you know, and trades never go out of business. You know, you always need somebody to do those things. We'll always need that. So I think it's like, I think you're in the right place at the right time. That's what it seems.
So far, all the feedback's been really good. So yeah, I'm going to try to, wrote a bunch of stuff. I've had a few people kind of read it. Got a little bit of feedback on that, but yeah. So I kind of have a plan. I'm trying to start some more media things to like unroll it, and like I said, hopefully by like 2024 or sometime it'll be like ready to start, I guess. So
awesome.
that way
Awesome. Yeah, check out the. Yeah, no, that seems realistic. Yeah, check out the link that I sent you and Dafyomi stuff. And probably if you want to talk to like Khezi or Jacob about it, they can tell you a ton of how that infrastructure is set up so that you could possibly take parts of it that work really well and, you know, and then do your own stuff. I think I get the hunch that that might be super helpful just because it has like a year, 100 years worth of like, this works, you know, for that sort of thing.
Check it out. Check it out for sure.
Yeah. Okay.
I
My
love the
dinner just
idea.
arrived.
Oh,
Okay.
No, go ahead. I got a couple minutes.
I was just saying that, you know, I fall into the trap of sort of reinventing the wheel all the time because for whatever reason, I think my situation's unique or something like that. But I imagine that there are a lot of people who have gone through hardship that you could avoid by just discussing, you know, how their program has worked and evolved throughout the years. You know, technology is definitely going to be something that you'll want to integrate, you know, like, because, you know, a carpenter 100 years ago wasn't working with CNC machines and things like that, like somebody would now. In any case, I know that there are scholarships all over the place. One I saw most recently was from the guy from Dirty Jobs, Mike Rowe. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but boy, oh boy, it wouldn't surprise me if he would have a ton of advice and even be willing to promote your endeavor if you like once you're like in full swing. Not even like, the whole point is to try to get the advice before you're in full swing, right?
Yeah, I know. Yeah, 'cause I've heard about his thing and stuff. I just think I just have to make it seem not too overtly religious to probably, but I mean, I don't think that's really a problem.
I would advise you the opposite. Like in one situation, like you're right, you would scare off people, but the thing that makes what you're doing what it is because you're recognizing that the character of the person and their connection to their vocation spiritually is what makes it valuable. If you're not if you don't love your work and you're not a person who's trustworthy in a traditional sense, like you have Christian values, this thing ain't like, you don't, what are you doing? Like, that's the whole point.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm glad I caught you. I may pop in later. We'll see. But I'm going to go eat some food now
my
because that's
phone's
my
gonna
highest
die in
priority.
like 5 minutes, so. Yeah. All right.
Good to see
good
you.
to talk to you.
All
Thanks
right.
for sharing that.
Bye,
I'll
gentlemen.
check it out.
Hello, Michael.
Hello. I'm
Got
my phone's
two
about to
meetings
die,
going
and
on.
I'm not. Oh, okay. Well, I'm not. I still have work to do, so I probably should go.
Yep.
So if you want to end things,
Yeah, I'll end the broadcast. Thanks for swinging by, Michael. I'm going to catch what y'all were talking about later. All right.
All right. Good to talk to you.
Bye-bye.